Chapter 169. One interesting world. While weakening the microscopic barrier, it's also compatible with magic. Chun-Ong slowly walked out of the cube. Victor collapsed beside him. There was no will to resist in his eyes. The weak microscopic barrier makes it easier for this world to achieve deep technological breakthroughs. In other words, the proliferation of black technology. The compatibility with the laws of magic adds chaos and disorder to this world. What an interesting world. Chun-Ong put Victor's mask on his face. As he walked, Skynet completely unfolded in this world. The golden ring was still on Chun-Ang's left index finger. The darkness around him still converged into a solid robe. It extended down from Chun-Ang's shoulder and finally dragged on the ground. Even with the mask, Chun-Ong still hid his face under the hood. He looked mysterious. The power of the Lord of the Ring silently seeped into Victor's soul. In front of the Lord of the Ring, the weak soul of a mortal was like a corpse on an operating table, allowing Chun-Ong to dissect, analyze, and change it. Chun-Ong deftly separated Victor's soul from his complicated emotions, numerous memories, and the extraordinary power that came from his superpower. Chun-Ong stripped away what he needed from his soul. The fragmented concepts and spirituality came from his emotions, memories, and personality. In the concept of magic, they were equivalent to the core existence of a true name. They were easily separated and controlled by Chun-Ong. I want your name. Everything in Victor's soul that represented doom was completely separated and taken away in terms of concept and soul. From now on, Dr. Doom said that it would become a glory that belonged to only one person. Victor, on the other hand, was just Victor. He would lose everything that Dr. Doom represented, including memories, abilities, and emotions. From the perspective of magic, signing a true name in the name of Doom with this world meant that Chun-Ong would replace everything that Doom had in this world, including the true name that cast spells. Reed watched as Victor fell helplessly in front of Chun-Ong. He watched as Victor lost a vital part himself in the hands of Chun-Ong. Although the two were enemies, Reed couldn't help but feel sympathy and indignation. This method of taking away an inseparable part of a person with a flip of the hand was terrifying. In magic, life and lifespan, cause and effect. The ritual was just like the oath. It was a tangible power. However, in a world where magic had been lost, such a scene was enough to make any scientist's worldview collapse. Unfortunately, the six of them, including Chun-Ong, Victor, and the Fantastic Four, were all top scientists. Excluding Chun-Ong, everyone except Victor was shocked on the spot. I am Dr. Doom. Chun-Ong stepped on the expanded version of Skynet and looked down at the city. He saw the familiar traffic and the bright lights. Skynet was infecting the world at a terrifying speed. I've finally returned to my world. War. The world of famine, plague, and death. Dr. Doom? What exactly are you? Reed struggled to get up from his chair. Sue had taken advantage of Victor's preoccupation to help him remove the frozen liquid nitrogen. No matter who you are, Earth is not a place for you to behave atrociously. The heavily wounded Fantastic Four stood side by side, blocking Chun-Ang's path. Behind Chun-Ong, Skynet's mechanical body had completed its first reconstruction. The shapeless, massless, and featureless Skynet had transformed. He reassembled his body in a complicated and dazzling manner. A deafening roar that reverberated for hundreds of miles came from the mouth of the giant mechanical dragon. There was a loud rumble, accompanied by the sound of concrete shattering. The top of the building was lifted by the strange dragon, revealing the blue sky. The giant mechanical beast, thousands of meters long, was hovering above the building. The strong wind made it difficult for them to stand, but Chun-Ong stood firmly on top of the strange dragon. Looking down at the vast world, the pedestrians were like ants weaving through a web. Chun-Ong could even smell the faintest and most familiar smell of gunpowder coming from Chinatown. Today was China's traditional Lunar New Year. A long sigh came from Chun-Ang's mouth. His unusually clear Chinese echoed in the ears of the Fantastic Four. As a stranger in a foreign land, I miss my family even more during festivals. With a whoosh, accompanied by the sound of air being torn apart, the giant mechanical dragon rose into the sky in the blink of an eye. It rose thousands of meters into the sky and turned into a small black, disappearing from everyone's sight. Only then did the Fantastic Four have the opportunity to break free from the restraints that were stuck on their joints. But the figure had already disappeared into the horizon. Dr. Doom, a super criminal who appeared in New York 36 hours ago. He is proficient in magic and technology and possesses a very high-tech mechanical armor. His origin is related to a special item. Please look at file D276, a metal cube found in a space cosmic storm. We speculate that he may come from an unknown civilization, but the cube, closely related to his origin, has an important religious and historical position in the ancient texts of Earth. We have found the same model in the pyramids, in the mausoleum of the first emperor in Angkor Wat, and in the ancient city of Rome. In Christianity, it represents the war of one of the four horsemen of the apocalypse. In Buddhism, it is known as the end of all wisdom. In the primitive voodoo religion and Mayan ruins, it is regarded as the harbinger of disaster and the incarnation of fear. Nick Fury stared silently at the metal cube in the projection. Everyone knew that his attention was not focused on the beautiful and mysterious patterns, but no one would disturb his thoughts unknowingly. This case is under S.H.I.E.L.D.'s jurisdiction. Nick Fury said resolutely, "It doesn't belong to Area 51 F***CK or IA. We are touching a very dangerous field, a field that is relatively unfamiliar to humans. Whether it is space or history, it is quite dangerous for us. This is not only an opportunity, but also a challenge." Dr. Doom is a typical high IQ criminal. He may have mastered knowledge and technology that is completely unimaginable on Earth. In the process of investigation and execution, open imagination is allowed, and thinking that breaks through common sense is allowed. Let the best hypnosis experts wait in the White House. Send letters to the university's special history and cultural research scholars and apply for support from some special departments. We need to figure out his mysticism system. Activate abnormal case 093 and monitor the psychology and behavior of key personnel. We need to prevent a sudden attack from supernatural factors. Nick's eyes flashed with an indecipherable glint as he muttered to himself. Chapter 170. When Chenong appeared in the streets of New York, he had changed his clothes. He now looked like a Chinese studying in New York, showing a harmless and peaceful temperament. It was a leisurely afternoon, and the streets of New York were bustling and lively. Tourists and students from all over the world could be seen everywhere. Even Chun Ang's obvious oriental dress was not eye-catching. This is Manhattan. Chenong was very familiar with this place. His first laboratory and consortium were in Manhattan, and the first city he destroyed with his own hands was Manhattan, New York. Every street and every high-rise building here might have once been his property or occupied by him. Even if they were not, they must have been destroyed by him. Chenong could even clearly remember the Empire State Building where the Iron Throne was located, half of Manhattan that was destroyed by an electromagnetic cannon, and the other half of Manhattan that was eventually covered by a meteorite base. There is no surface covered by the metal base, no quantum light brain in the underground core, no 200 trillion engineering test robots, no gravity wells, no dimensional detection laboratory, no large hyperspace warp laboratory, no mind network, and most importantly, no experimental equipment and venue that Chenong is familiar with. The former Swallowing Star Base and the underground laboratory of the consortium have no traces of their existence here. Without the necessary experimental equipment, personnel, and venues, this is an ordinary urban core area. No matter which world it is, this is his lair. Marvel World is a world of great research value, even for Chenong. There are endless cosmic civilizations and magical knowledge here. Many representative and specific powerful forces have aroused Chun Ang's interest. As Chun Ang gradually grew up, the more he pursued the mysteries of the universe and life, the more obsessed he became. The process of pursuing Tao ultimate, and truth was a journey worth giving everything. The first thing he faced was the problem of a stable base. Any scientific experiment needs a certain place. Equipment and personnel. Iron Man's armor was not made by him with a hammer. At the level of Chunong, the experimental conditions for scientific research are becoming more and more demanding. He even needs to build laboratories in some extreme cosmic environments. Of course, a large number of resources are indispensable. A conservative estimate is that the material of the Earth is not enough for a large-scale experiment in the warp laboratory. However, all these problems will wait until the return of the four knights who have already taken root in the universe. It was no longer a problem. Before that, Chunong needed a simple base that could satisfy his basic research and experiments. Even though most of the materials could be solved by Skynet, he still needed to dig out the ground under Manhattan. Some of the resources that were unique to Earth could only be solved with the full economic power of a middle-sized developed country. Within a week, establish a consortium 20 times larger than Stark Industries? It seemed like a fairy tale, but as long as Chunong needed it. That was not impossible. Skynet build a world market model, analyze global economic data, and begin to infiltrate the internet. Chunong needed the world to maintain stability for the time being, but that did not mean that he would follow the rules. As a powerhouse, it had become his instinct to make others obey his rules, carry out the material preparations, and attack the upper echelons of the global economy. Prepare to take control of financial institutions and acquire groups with strong scientific research capabilities and economic strength. Control and eliminate all economic entities and natural persons who try to obstruct the progress of the plan, according to the coefficient of influence: warning, obstruction, control, and elimination. Chunong flipped through the massive amount of information sent back by Skynet in the mental network while making adjustments to Skynet's plan. Prepare the Manhattan construction plan. List the organizations and individuals that affect the progress of the plan, and conduct a comprehensive analysis according to the coefficient of influence and anti-controllability. I want to know who we can't control for the time being, and who is the first to be eliminated. Who is the first? Many names rolled on Skynet during the war, and the most influential was, of course, the United States government. It could be subdivided into three major categories: government departments, intelligence organizations, and special intelligence organizations. In addition, there were the powerful consortia and economies in New York, but these groups were important chess pieces to control the development of the situation and could not be easily controlled. Therefore, the first name that popped up on Skynet was not as famous as Tony Stark, Bush, or Norman Osborn, but it was also the famous Emperor Gene Bing of the underground world. Doom? Dr. Doom? Another coward who hides himself behind a mask. The huge kingpin lay relaxed in the hot spring. His strong muscles of more than 400 pounds gave him infinite strength, and his fighting ability was once close to the most powerful human on Earth, but it also brought great pressure and negative effects to his internal organs and body circulation. Kingpin had a team of more than 200 doctors to solve this problem for him. He often took expensive drugs and technological products. In order to reduce the pressure on his heart, he had the habit of soaking in hot springs. Victor Von Doom? If it wasn't you, who would it be? Kingpin shook his head and said, "If it wasn't you? Why are all the results of the investigation pointing to you, the murdered shareholders, the competitors that you destroyed, and the Fantastic Four? If it was you, why do I feel uneasy? You are far from enough to make me feel fear. Doom, those four superheroes have their eyes on you, Boras." The lawyer on the side handed him the documents. Reed discovered the people we sent to infiltrate the Victor Corporation. He discovered that we obtained a mutation sample from that cosmic storm. They are investigating us. For self-righteous clowns, nothing to worry about. Kingpin stood up from the water, his muscles piled up like a hill, making him look like a devil. Those so-called heroes, the Punisher, Super Daredevil, they can cause us some trouble, but they will never threaten our foundation. This world is ours after all. What's really worth worrying about are those who are like us. Those who are most like us are often the most dangerous. I've spent countless days in the dark, and seen many dangerous existences. Stark, Osborne, and the most dangerous government. Why do I have to pay taxes for the U.S. government when I can retaliate against the police? Because Stark has to pay taxes. Kingpin looked at the documents in his hand and clasped his hands together. The instantaneous, explosive force from his muscles shattered the documents into fingernail-sized pieces. He stepped out of the pool and pulled out a tightly bound man from another boiling pool on the side. The hot boiling water turned the man's eyes gray, and his bones were visible under his cracked skin. Kingpin dragged the man from the rough wooden floor to the concrete floor, staining the road with blood. There are two sides to this world. Our clients are powerful and have amazing wealth. They receive the envy, jealousy, and praise of everyone every day, but their hearts are empty. They need something to fill their hearts. Some bloody, exciting games. Obviously, that's something that can't be known, so they need me, Kingpin, to deal with these things for them. Kingpin's thick fingers tore open the flesh on the man's face. His voice was bloody. Including people like you. You have a family, son. A job as a reporter won't make you famous, but persistence and stupidity will destroy them. You should have read the information you stole. Our clients like to hunt and play games. For them, what is more suitable prey than a young, beautiful girl and a happy family? They play games with your cherished love, but you can't stop them. Kingpin pulled the man's scalp and mercilessly slammed him against the wall. Because you are insignificant. Kingpin clapped his hands, wiped the blood on the towel handed over by his men, looked at the man on the ground like a dead dog, and ordered, "Drag him down, let him see his family join the game with his own eyes, and choose a rich man with special hobbies for his daughter. I guarantee that she will be satisfied. We have all kinds of guests with special hobbies." Kingpin nodded indifferently. His cruel and excited eyes told everyone that he enjoyed this kind of thing very much. But Kingpin's reaction and senses were very keen. Although his body was huge, he was not clumsy. Instead, he could smell any difference in the smell of blood within a kilometer. The strong smell of blood that made Kingpin's hair stand came from outside the door. It was not the smell of blood in the sense of olfactory molecules, but a smell of killing, cruelty, terror, and brutality. It belonged to the common sense of the butchers in the dark. Kingpin felt several bloody smells that made him feel like there was a blade on his back, and a terrifying aura like the abyss. It belonged to the monarch in the darkness. "Go outside and take a look," Kingpin ordered calmly, but he prepared to leave from another passage. His men were used to obeying some of his strange orders, so they obediently walked out. Kingpin's underground kingdom was powerful and magnificent. He employed nearly 100 superpowered killers, and experimental bases for studying superpowers were spread all over the world. The weapons used by his private army were much more advanced than the weapons in any place in the world. He was the unshakable king of the underworld. He also had an evil brain. Anyone who tried to kill him would first have to deal with his kingdom, kill his powerful and fearless guards, kill those cruel and terrifying superpowered killers, and deal with all kinds of dangerous technological remnants and modified humans. Even if the U.S. government wanted to deal with him, they would have to be mentally prepared to turn half of New York into ruins. The most important thing for me is to survive. I will fight for everything else when I have the chance. Don't let arrogance, power, wealth, and dignity blind your eyes. The most important thing is safety. Before Kingpin could repeat his words, his most reliable killer, Bullseye, who had always been loyal to him, flew up in front of him. Kingpin heard a familiar crisp sound. It was the sound of bones breaking, but it had never been as neat as it was today. Crack. Bullseye's upper body was deeply caved in, and flesh fell off his skin. First, there was a bowl-sized hole in his chest. White ribs pierced through the skin, and the bone stubs hit Kingpin's face. Then there was an even more violent tearing and explosion. Everything, including body parts, blood, flesh, bones, and fat, was evenly turned into mud and splashed out from Bullseye's body. Chapter 171. Of all the villains I've ever seen, you're by no means the cruelest. Of all the ants I've trampled, you're not the strongest. Do you think you're cruel? tyrannical, and fearsome. The shadow behind Bullseye was elongated. The ground rolled in front of Kingpin's eyes, and the wooden floor shattered into countless small pieces. You're still far from it. The shadow wasn't strong. He was covered in a layer of gray metal, and he wore a very familiar mask on his face. At this time, dense silver-white machines poured out of the cracks in the ground and gathered under his body. The skinny shadow was visible to the naked eye in front of Kingpin, and everything around his body was shattered, the concrete and tile pieces that suddenly cracked from the outer wall, the exposed bricks, the exposed steel bars, the wires, the wooden boards, and even the light bulbs on the ceiling all burst open. The fragments of these things revolved around the shadow like stars. These things hit Kingpin's exposed upper body, and the flesh and blood burst from Kingpin's skin. His skin was broken, and his muscles were peeled off. In just a few words, Kingpin had become a blurry mass of flesh and blood, but he still persisted and put his hands in front of his head. The shadow, like an irresistible god, walked up to him. In Kingpin's heart-wrenching screams, he called out the shadow's name, Dumb. I'm willing to surrender, Dr. Doom. Kingpin struggled to kneel in front of the shadow. I'm willing to be loyal to you and offer my only loyalty and faith. I'll repay you with everything I have. In my kingdom, you'll be the supreme king. In New York, I control the entire criminal empire in the East. I know the name, hobbies, and even the true identity of every supercriminal. I'm famous among them, and I control many powerful villains and thugs. They dare to do anything. I'm also friends with many big shots, and I have something on them. With a single order from you, the entire East will surrender to you. In the air, the voice was still calm and gentle. But in the depths of the tone, there was an indelible smell of blood. Dumb could be called polite, but that kind of deep, bottomless darkness seemed to devour everything. It was as if it could devour all existences. Serenity, nostalgia, lament, and sacrifice. Kingpin. He dragged his voice. Thank you for your kindness, but unfortunately, I don't need it. Kingpin's wail spread far and wide. Very far away, even in the normal world thousands of meters away, the inhuman scream could still be heard. It was the most miserable scream of a person. Coming from a mouth of an unyielding person like Kingpin, he must have experienced some fear that would make one's mind collapse. The torture that was enough to destroy him was 100 times crueler than any human could imagine. You are a good man, the shadow whispered in Kingpin's ear. Although I'm just a mechanical carrier, I can still use some ancient, evil knowledge, some things that you absolutely can't imagine. Do you know demons? That was the knowledge that came from them. Knowledge of the soul, torture, depravity, fear, cruelty, despair. You're a good material, King. You have a high-quality soul and a very malleable body. My main body was once a sovereign of darkness. He ruled the abyss and hell, making all demons and devils fear him as a god. He is proficient in all knowledge that excavates a person's heart and nature. He is good at creating a completely new individual. The Black Shadow's voice was so calm that it was almost cold, making people ignore the cruelty and tyranny that he was carrying out that exceeded the limits of human endurance. However, Gold would not ignore it. He could only howl in a nightmarish manner. He could only use nightmarish wails to express his feelings. Chun Ang's mechanical carrier had already disappeared, and in its place were countless moving objects in the air. There were metal, machinery, and shattered ruins. There were steel pipes, iron pieces, rivets, stones, broken porcelain, and all kinds of other messy objects. In Kingpin's underground base, everything that could move was moving, and everything that could not move was broken into moving fragments, flying all over the sky. The only thing that didn't change was a lump of mud called Kingpin. Blood vessels, nerves, everything was mutating and growing. On Kingpin's bloody body, thick blood vessels protruded out of the body and waved like tentacles. The corpses of the guards and psychics who died in the underground base were dissolved by the tentacles, and the separated flesh and blood were added to the lump of flesh and blood, becoming nutrients for its growth. Chun Ang's mechanical clone had already turned into the flying ruins in the air, leaving only the iconic mask floating in the air, as if a face was watching all this. The matter of the base was being broken and reorganized. They were shattered into the smallest state, and then they were copied by the mechanical structure in the air, used, and reorganized into the shape Chunong needed. Then, like a miracle, they were reassembled in the original site of the underground base. The micro-robots, which appeared as concrete, grew load-bearing pillars at the key points of the structure. The high-strength porcelain shell robots turned into tiles and spread on the ground. The wooden micro-robots reorganized into exquisite and novel furniture, and the metal robots carefully formed some cutting-edge equipment and weapons. An underground base appeared out of thin air at the original site of Kingpin's base, and Kingpin himself became a large lump of flesh and blood, controlled in the core of the laboratory. A steady stream of Skynet robots emerged from the depths of the Earth, and a huge energy core and quantum brain were gradually perfected. The base was expanding silently, with Kingpin's territory as the core, down to the high-density magma, 5,000 meters deep, up to the underground sewer of New York. A huge monster was taking shape. The core brain of the base flashed with a light blue light, and a group of information was sent to Chun Ang's desk at the fastest speed. The first experimental material is in place. The original body is Kingpin, the holder of the limit of the human body, and the soul is excellent. Because of his heinous crimes and insane behavior, he is favored by the evil origin force. The soul has shown signs of semi-demonization. In extreme pain and torture, the soul becomes more and more excellent. It is a very high-quality experimental material for demonology and black magic. There are already 126 reversible experiments ready to be carried out, which will be of great help to the study of demons and devils, as well as the cracking of black magic. Skynet requests to arrange for 8 more reliable, irreversible experiments to be carried out on Kingpin. This will be of great significance to the study of the soul, demonology, chaos, abyssal, and black magic analysis. Experiment approved. Send out combat squads to capture supercriminals as experimental materials. Under the curtain of night in New York City, some young girls appeared on the streets with blank faces, and some well-dressed teenagers, young people, middle-aged people, and old people looked around in confusion. They felt that they had lost some memories that they didn't want to recall. They followed the memories and returned to those at home without any relatives. Chun Ang's mechanical clone, with Dum's mask as the core, reassembled at the top of the Empire State Building. A large number of materials and videos about the rich and officials that Kingpin had were sent to him. The materials that hit the darkest side of human nature were placed in front of him. On the dark side of this world, humans unscrupulously released the darkness and cruelty in their hearts. They released the demons in their hearts in the most vicious way they could think of, and they proved their power to kill in front of the weak. Even if one ignored the material that could make people hate the world, just from those cold words alone, one could feel the chilling terror. There was no extraordinary power. There was no blessing of darkness, no demonic aura. On ordinary A4 white paper, one could smell a bloody smell that could not be dispersed. In this familiar place, Chunong once again stood at the top of New York, looking down at the city that was reborn from the long river of time. It was a world of wealth, prosperity, and distortion, a world where light and evil were both inside and outside. Skynet unfolded in the void, and a grand flow of information unfolded the world in front of Chunong. A lonely sigh. Chapter 172. We're in big trouble. Nick Fury's face had never been so livid. His brows were furrowed, and a murderous aura overflowed. On the table in front of him, a document with a top-secret warning written in bright red letters was pressed down on the table. There have been many reports of vicious cases in the news these days. It seems that everything is safe and the world is at peace. It seems that even superheroes and supercriminals don't come out to cause trouble. But in fact, we've been pushed to the edge. Nick Fury handed the document to Coulson. I can only trust you now. Carlson flipped open the document and saw a line of bold, blood-red words. The target is codenamed Doom, or Dr. Doom. He first appeared in the duel between the suspect Victor Von Doom, Appendix 2. 3, and the Fantastic Four, Appendix 1. 7, and was summoned by the Special Item War Rubik's Cube, Appendix 1. 2. The target, Dr. Doom, has an extremely powerful supernatural ability. Doctor Strange has confirmed that it is an extremely dangerous magic power. Doctor Strange suspects that the target has god infallibility. At the same time, the target also possesses extremely advanced scientific capabilities. The scientific and technological level that the target has displayed has been appraised by Tony Stark, Hank Pym, and Rhett Richard. At the very least, in the fields of quantum interference, space physics, energy and material science, robotics, artificial intelligence, and conventional physics, the target is at least one generation ahead. At the top of the document, a warning was written in the most striking orange bold letters. Target Dr. Doom, extremely dangerous. Nick waited for Carlson to finish flipping through the document before telling him cautiously, "What we have to face isn't just these. He's the most dangerous supercriminal so far. Whether it's magic or technology, we can't do anything to him. Even those who are extremely outstanding in various fields are not sure that they can deal with him." With Tawny's pride, he actually admitted that he couldn't design a specific weapon for Doom alone. He actually admitted that he couldn't design a weapon specifically for Doom. Reed also reminded me that we might be facing technology that is beyond our imagination, breaking common sense, and even defying logic and mathematics. Nick turned on the projector on their side, and a blurry image appeared in the shaking. It was obvious that it was shot in a hurry. On the screen, a group of militants were shooting with guns, but there was no one in front of them. From the video, Carlson felt an invisible wave sweeping from a distance, and a militant was squeezed into a ball of meat within 3 seconds. Blood sprayed out evenly from their bodies. Even the equipment on their bodies and the weapons in their hands were crushed into uniform chunks by that invisible ripple. This is a video of a small gang that happened in New York's Blackstreet this morning. Nick raised the remote and switched to another video. This is a husband who has been warned. The information provided to us. The background of the video was obviously an extremely safe base, with guards and mercenaries everywhere. The corpses stretched from the entrance of the base all the way to the end of the video. As the video switched, the situation on the other side was revealed. It was a huge humanoid creature that was 10 meters tall. Dark red flames rose from its exposed skin. 2 huge bat wings extended from its ribs to its back, spreading out over 10 meters. Long curved horns pass through its 2 narrow points. Under the giant feet with reverse joints, there were even horny hooves similar to those of an antelope. Its face was a bit like a human, but lava and flames flowed out of its facial features. From the contours of its face composed of bones, dark red lava could be seen flowing, as well as a dark, fallen soul. Kingpin. Carlson shouted the name of the soul. He watched him suffer in the flames of hell. It roared, sinister and terrifying. This body was its support, as well as its cage. His soul would forever be tormented and tormented within the raging flames. It became the source of the hatred, curse, resentment, distortion, and endless pain of this demon's body. That's him. Although Nick Fury had analyzed it many times, he was still shocked by the fear that stemmed from faith. The monster they saw in the Bible and legends appeared in front of them in real life. Wherever it passed, all the enemies that stood in its way, they had all turned into corpses and souls burning in the flames. The strange dark red flames continued to spread as it moved forward. Occasionally, a machine would explode, and flames and debris would rush in front of it. The guards in front of the passageway rushed over, but they were caught by its long whip at the waist. The dark red flames on the whip ignited, turning everything into ashes. The burning soul wailed, and the resisting guards were confused and terrified. In such a tunnel, there was no place to hide when the demon waved its whip. The bullets turned into molten copper in the flames on the surface of the demon's body, plating the demon's skin with a beautiful layer of gold. And to do all this, the demon didn't even seriously kill. The demon easily defeated the remaining guards, and they lost all fighting spirit. It picked up the trembling, skinny old man hiding in the deepest part of the base and dragged him out of the base. After Ghost Rider confirmed it on the spot, what appeared in the video is the kind of existence we're familiar with, a demon that represents extreme depravity and evil. Nick's tone was heavy. It smells of sulfur and lava, and its soul burns with an inextinguishable flame of hatred. Ghost Rider thinks that this is an extremely dangerous demon, and it's very likely to be one of the most dangerous and powerful demons, a Balrog. The two of them fell into a long silence. As humans, they were extremely wary of this mythical creature, often bathed in fire, using lava as armor and flames as cloak, and feeding on the souls of sinners. Wrapped in the inextinguishable flames of sin, it curses everything in the world with hatred, jealousy, resentment, and pain. Now we know what kind of monster we're facing. Kingpin was killed in his lair. The New York government once tried to attack that place, and after evaluation, they needed an armor division and at least 5 regiments of military force to destroy that lair. And there was no guarantee that they could capture Kingpin alive. Coupled with the influence of the big shots behind him, they had no choice but to give up on this plan. We don't have any information about that night. We only know that on that day, Kingpin's underground kingdom was shrouded in a shadow, and those villains were as obedient as dogs under the shadow. All of Kingpin's guards disappeared, and at the same time, some victims who were confirmed to be dead or missing appeared on the streets of New York, but they lost all memories of that story. There's no need for us to be enemies. Dr. Doom hasn't harmed ordinary people yet. Instead of paying a huge price to challenge a dangerous target, it's better to maintain vigilance and surveillance, Coulson suggested. Nick stared at him until the atmosphere between them fell silent again. Do you know who was dragged away in the video just now? Oh, it's the second largest shareholder of Oscorp Industries. Right now, he's actively contacting other shareholders to buy Oscorp Industries. He didn't die, and no one knows how he came back alive. And this kind of thing keeps happening again and again. Your life is peaceful, Agent, but in the capital market, there are already turbulent waves. Nick said solemnly, "Don't let your guard down." Dr. Doom is the most dangerous and crazy supercriminal in S.H.I.E.L.D.'s history. His power is spreading wildly in New York, and S.H.I.E.L.D. can't completely monitor the flow of his capital. I don't know how many of the major companies related to our country are already under his control, and how many are under his control. We need a group of heroes, because no one is a match for a solo superhero. We need to unite, and together with our friends who support us, control Doom's evil intentions. Under Manhattan, the underground tunnels connected to an enormous underground city. In a world of lava and fire, countless materials from the core of the planet were fished out and turned into simple substances that could be replenished at any time under the processing of Skynet. In the busy underground world, there was endless loneliness. In the core laboratory, Chun-Ong stopped the experiment in his hand, shook his head, and whispered, "It's coming." Skynet was like a giant spider, and the extremely tiny robots it created were like a spider web, spreading all over the world. A huge amount of information was collected by the robots, gathering into a vast and unparalleled information torrent for Chun-Ong to view and monitor. To be continued. Chapter 173. Tony Stark found something extraordinary in his lab. As a top scientist and technological genius, few things can bother him like this. He was young, rich, and talented. He was confident that there was nothing in the world that could baffle him. Until today, he found a special trace in J.A.R.V.I.S. S-code. If it weren't for his strong intuition, anyone would have ignored the extremely subtle trace. J.A.R.V.I.S. You're sick. Tony supported his forehead with his hand and looked at the row of pale, golden code data projected in front of him. He no longer had his usual lascivious look on his face. I realize that perhaps I have really underestimated the people of the world. A very aggressive intelligence. These. You should be glad that this is just a tentacle that controls the network, just like a spider entrenched in its territory. It is the spider on the internet. Tony Stark quickly checked JARVIS' intelligent code. Fortunately, it's just a tentacle. The prototype of this intelligent virus should be infection and infiltration. If the main body of that intelligent program comes here, then I have to delete you, JARVIS. Let me check, where are you hiding? Tony Stark seemed to have met a beauty that made his blood boil, and he operated on the supercomputer in high spirits. Stark Industries' intelligent computer is definitely the most advanced in the entire United States. The computing speed of the light brain that has broken through the photon barrier is at least 5 years ahead of the entire world. This is also one of the most important pillars of Stark Industries. It was designed by Tony Stark's father, Howard Stark, and a miracle completed by Stark Jr., but the only problem is that this time its target is Skynet. Chun-Ang's consciousness directly controls Skynet. Chun-Ang, who got rid of the shackles of the body after the divine change, sublimated himself into a higher concept, and his consciousness therefore showed a more complex existence. What humans can recognize is only a part of him. Chun-Ang's final consciousness is a three-dimensional and complete way of existence. Anyone who tried to pry into the existence of his personality could only see the surface of humanity, just like intelligent life in a two-dimensional world trying to pry into the existence of a higher dimension. They could recognize a distorted appearance, but they were not on the same level. This kind of recognition would always be incomplete. Although it was only his consciousness that descended into this world, it was no longer important to Chun-Ang whether he had a body or not. He could control Skynet at any time, and as long as he knew its form, he could become any form of life. Of course, that was only limited to the material world. Skynet had yet to break through the physical barrier. Tani searched for traces of Skynet in the world of the internet. In a world of protocols, data, and rules, power is the strongest hacker. Stark Industries happens to be one of the international internet service providers. It can be said that the architecture and protocols of the internet are determined by them. All the firewalls are open to him. All the data that is confidential to users is at his disposal, and he can access the backdoor and loopholes of the data protocol at will, and even touch the forbidden areas of the law. Tani believes that there is no more powerful hacker in the world than him. With the help of JARVIS and the supercomputer, he can quickly find that guy. Are you looking for me? The light screen projected in front of Stark suddenly turned black, and in the center, these 3 words flashed. Tani's face was black, and he pretended to be calm. Try to forget the shame of being played. Although it's hard to believe, I have to admit that you surprised me. In the eyes of the ignorant, the internet is a magical thing. It seems to be like a world. Of course, we all know that this is impossible. The internet is a man-made technological object that can be understood, learned, and controlled. In the eyes of people who don't understand the internet, data and networking are like magic, and hackers are magicians. But not in my eyes. Hackers are just low-level technical workers who can't violate the fundamental laws of the internet. Tani said with certainty. Now, tell me, what did you do to control all this and break the basic laws of the internet to come in front of me? Did you invade my home? Or did you leave a backdoor in the supercomputer of Stark Industries? There was silence on the screen. Tani sneered and pulled his hand out of his trouser pocket. It was a small silver remote control. I knew a long time ago that technology is sometimes not so reliable. Tani firmly pressed the button. In the most critical places of the villa, the data cable and the power supply were suddenly physically disconnected. It was a closed system, and high technology was sometimes dangerous, so it was important to leave restrictions. No matter how powerful a hacker is, there is no way to break the network cable. Physical interruption is almost the nemesis of all internet control. Looking at the black screen in front of him, Tani Stark shook his head gloomily. This time, can you climb out of the screen? After saying this, Stark laughed at himself. But as the screen lit up again, the laughter turned into panic. The projected light screen was suspended in front of Stark, and a line of text was slowly typed out. You have great potential, but as a researcher, you have not yet grown up. Nice to meet you. I am Skynet. I expected it. Okay, I admit I lost. Tawny raised his hands helplessly. I don't know if you can hear me on the screen. If you can't hear me, just pretend I didn't say it before. Yes, you have proved yourself. Now you can go around and say that you have defeated Tawny. Stark, while he is not paying attention, the cursor on the screen flickered twice, and the text continued. This is not a defeat, but an invitation. My master thinks that the world can become more exciting, so he made an invitation. Every excellent seed needs the right soil, and this invitation is the soil for those seeds to grow. Should I be honored by this? Stark spread his hands. Yes. How can you be so sure of it? Only I. Stark raised his index finger and pointed at the screen, then suddenly put it down in frustration. Competing with an intelligent program, I am also... He shook his head, expressing his low mood. In my data, you're one of the top researchers. Your research is accurate, stable, and full of imagination and creativity. There are not many people who can achieve great achievements in theoretical science and practical technology at the same time. You're the youngest one, but you seem to be wasting your talent in a life of debauchery. How I live is my own business. Tawny did not comment. Chapter 174. Skynet, even if Skynet did not exert its full strength, is a very terrible existence. During this time, SHIELD has received more complaints than in the past year, and they are all existences they can't afford to offend. The American system determined that it must open its doors to the operation of capital. The capital trust and operation system, represented by banks and securities companies, together with the country's system and laws, formed a complicated game of rules. It was a game of capital, a game of power. Complex contracts and contracts, complex financial rules, and countless accounting and law firms. It ensures that any accounting group with less than 80 people can't figure out the ins and outs of finance, and that lawyers with an IQ below 180 can't figure out this system. This is the stage of capital, elites, and lawyers. Cross-shareholdings, legal entities, and offshore companies, trust funds, and securities companies. The will behind the capital was like an invisible hand, controlling the entire economic system through all of these. The control power of these large and small funds and investment companies is always gathered in the hands of a few families in a dazzling shareholding and contract. Oscorp's owner is Norman Osborn, and the chairman of Stark Industries is Tawny Stark. But who knows who the people who threatened to step down to force Norman to transform into the Green Goblin and warn Stark not to give up the arms sale. Thanks to the Office Information System, Chun Ong knows. He knew the network of capital that was hidden under complicated contracts and commissions. From banks to securities companies, from investments to shares, all the files and data that were on file and not on file were under the control of Skynet. Chun Ong knows those complex and headache-inducing relationships like the back of his hand. How can anyone figure this out? According to countless of the most complex laws and contracts, capital markets across the world. It took all the time since the birth of human finance to interweave a system that even the most powerful team of lawyers and accountants can't figure out. They should be safely in the hands of those who make the rules and referees of the game. What controls it? What controls office information and creates legal persons and companies all over the world? What takes away capital from their hands little by little according to those dazzling laws and contracts with cumbersome and complex procedures? Pentagon, to the Skynet Battle Command, the Spider Project Battle Center. According to the latest data, the mysterious Skynet of the Internet and information data has directly controlled more than 200 funds. This is only the part of the evidence we have. At least 10 times more financial institutions have been handed over. During this period of time, the flow of financial capital is 20 times more than usual. 4 trillion USD of capital might be controlled by Skynet. In a small conference room, Everyone stared at the terrifying data on the projection. The numbers were marked in shocking red. It truly reflected the turbulent waves under the calm exterior of the country. Damn it, do you people eat shit? The Secretary of State let out a terrifying roar and threw the documents on the table onto Nick's face. And you? Are you just going to sit back and watch that bastard destroy this country? Do you know what this number means? If that guy moved a finger on the keyboard, the United States would be finished. We will face an economic crisis 100 times more terrible than the Great Depression. The entire country's financial order will be beaten back to 20 years ago. Don't care about those clowns in tights. What can those clowns in masks and tights do? Robbery, violent crime will be cleaned up by the police. What else can they do other than add to the chaos? I don't care how much pressure you're under. Now I just want the results. We tried, but most financial institutions and banks refuse to provide us with information. They have a whole team of lawyers. The head of the White-Collar Crime Investigation Department explained with a pale face. The Secretary of State stared at him until he lowered his head in fear. So I brought you support. This year's scheduled Nobel Prize in Economics, the pioneer of the Internet Big Data Economic Model Theory, mathematician, economist Dr. Chun. Dr. Chun is a government-funded economist. He has high prestige in the economics community. He is also an authority on the integration of Skynet data economy. The Secretary of State opened the door and invited Chenong to walk in. Chenong looked a little older, at least 40 years old, but he looked gentle and refined. Although he had an elegant temperament and was dressed exquisitely, the characteristics of Asian were still very obvious. Asian? Some people secretly questioned, but the Secretary of State immediately stared back. Skynet is a concept. We don't really understand it. Chenong stood on the stage and explained to the people below, it is difficult for anyone to say what Skynet is. Is it an internet virus? Or is it another higher-level information exchange system? You often think of it as an intelligent life, but this is an abstract concept that does not involve the essence and core. I am invited by the Secretary of State to help you analyze and plan according to the characteristics of Skynet. First of all, in economic big data, the concept of Skynet is a cloud computing logic body. You can imagine that it is a logic life body that can complete any data calculation and analysis with endless computing power. In theory, it can do anything that mathematics can do. Therefore, after controlling 7% of the interference capital, it can completely control the economic operation of this country. Although what you said seems to make sense, I have to interrupt. Nick Fury shook his head and said, the foundation of this world is people. No matter how powerful Skynet is, it still exists in an illusory world. As long as it controls people, it is not invincible. Now it can use a virtual identity on the internet to remotely control lawyers and accountants to carry out some procedures for it. But as long as we target this and introduce some restrictive measures, it will be helpless. Nick Fury looked straight into Chunang's eyes and said firmly, our focus should be on people, the person behind the scenes who controls Skynet. I don't know why Dr. Chun diverted our attention from him, but I am sure that the person behind the scenes, Dr. Apocalypse, is the key to everything. If we get rid of him, Skynet will lose the ability to interfere with the real world, and its influence will be trapped in the virtual world. That way, the situation of the country's economy being controlled won't happen. I don't agree with you. Chenong did not care about Nick's threat. He acted as if he did not hear Nick's accusation. With all due respect, without enough information, targeting a scientist who created Skynet is an absolutely dangerous and reckless thing to do. A little carelessness will bring about irreversible consequences. So you still want to promote your theory of technological breakthrough? Nick raised his hand and gestured. Concentrate the scientific research power to make a breakthrough in Skynet technology to achieve the goal of counterattack and control. Your Ultron plan is indeed bold, using Skynet to achieve the goal of technological upgrading. It is very bold and very smart, but scientific progress is not in our hands. Technological breakthroughs rely on God's favor. It does not mean that scientists like Tony Stark, Pym, and Reed can achieve decisive results together. Nick Fury convinced everyone. Dr. Apocalypse is the core of the problem. What we need to do now is not to fear the possible crisis and consequences, but to prevent the damage that has already been done from expanding. We have already prepared for the worst. Yes, Dr. Apocalypse's desperate counterattack will cause heavy economic losses, but we can pay this price to eradicate the problem in the bud, destroy an enemy that we can see, or fight an enemy that we cannot understand in a completely unfamiliar field. I think the answer is self-evident. SHIELD has the ability and confidence to bring that Dr. Apocalypse to justice. We have prepared for this for a long time, and have also contacted many superheroes and vigilantes. This is also a rehearsal for our Avengers project. Nick Fury was confident. His plan was also complete and detailed. It was difficult to find loopholes in such a detailed plan. It could only be said that he was prepared. However, Chun-Ong still asked curiously, what if the worst situation is worse than you think? Chapter 175. My lord, they're here. In front of the Statue of Liberty, Chun-Ong faced the sea and looked down at the busy New York harbor like an ordinary tourist. However, he didn't seem to notice that there were fewer and fewer tourists around him. Clearly, someone was deliberately luring the tourists away. Some strong men with fierce auras, who didn't look like good people, replaced the tourists. As the tourists left one after another, these people didn't even care about covering their tracks anymore. The area within a kilometer of Chun-Ong was sealed off. As the last two tourists were persuaded to leave by the staff of the scenic spot, the atmosphere gradually became tense. An invisible tension unfolded between Chun-Ong and the agents of SHIELD in the military. Time seemed to be on SHIELD's side. The longer they delayed, the more combat power they could use. I feel a little strange, Reed said to Nick Fury. Dr. Doom is a very scary supercriminal. When he killed Victor, I was beside him and I was terrified. He's a cold-blooded and ruthless person. There's no way he doesn't know that hostages are our biggest threat and the most advantageous weapon in his hands. But the evacuation of the tourists has been successful. No matter what tricks he has, I have 10,000 ways to make him die without a whole corpse. Nick sneered. SHIELD isn't here to make a living. Mr. Miraculous was still a little worried. There were many superheroes who responded this time, and it was already the biggest operation in recent years. SHIELD had mobilized all their resources, so there was no reason for them to fail. It's too strange for him to come out. Just as we started the operation, he left his nest and went to visit the Statue of Liberty with a very conspicuous mask. It's really too strange. Mr. Miraculous felt the uneasiness in his heart become more and more obvious. He hesitated for a moment and decided to believe the stirrings in his heart. The surrounding soldiers were ready. If it was in the city center, HLD might not be determined to use heavy weapons, but there would be no such scruples in a safe report. Because of this, Mr. Miraculous felt a strong sense of uneasiness, both rationally and intuitively. Ignoring Nick's objections, he went straight to Chun-Ong. Dr. Doom, we meet again. Mr. Miraculous spread his hands, indicating that he had no ill intentions. SHIELD has no intention of becoming enemies with anyone. Doctor, but we are determined to maintain the order of this planet, this peaceful and orderly world, and I will not allow anyone to destroy it. Some of your actions have violated this rule. Chun-Ang's face was hidden behind the mask, so Mr. Miraculous couldn't see his expression. Order isn't eternal. On the contrary, it's a dynamic balance, a kind of competition and relative stability after determining one's status and identity. It was like an alien species in the biological system. They need to determine their position in the food chain through natural selection so that they can integrate into the local ecosystem. The same goes for human society. If you focus on a short-term, fixed order and treat this dynamic static fragment as a fixed truth, you will definitely see me as the enemy of order. Reed explained, "You don't have to worry about that. That's the truth." There was a hint of amusement in Chun Ang's voice. "When I came to this world, the order that you maintain has already been broken. This is an unchangeable fact. I can't be apart from the world, communicate, interact. Friction is a normal process, unless I am an invisible person. Otherwise, I will always have to follow the laws of nature to determine a new dynamic balance of order. But you should try to integrate and accept our order," Reed emphasized. "You may have misunderstood what I mean." Chenong was still calm. "Choosing how to adapt to the dynamic balance of this system is my business. All you can do is accept it. My choice is the law of nature. The strong will be the king." Reed's expression turned ugly. "If you choose war, then you'll have to go to war. That is equivalent to choosing destruction. SHIELD won't sit back and watch. We will do everything we can to destroy you. I don't care how you respond." Chen Ong looked back at SHIELD as special agents and the military, leaning against the railing behind him. "If you still don't understand, I can give you a vivid example. Do you see the ground under your feet? What happened here hundreds of years ago? Everything the European colonists did was based on the dynamic balance of the laws of nature. The order of America hundreds of years ago and the order of this land today have never been fixed. This is the result of the contact between civilizations, finding their own position in the dynamic order." Reed clenched his hands tightly. His heart sank deeper and deeper, and the suffocating sense of crisis became heavier and heavier. The Sea of New York Harbor was also getting calmer. This was obviously abnormal for a prosperous port that never slept. Even Chenong was a little surprised that the arrogant American government was actually willing to bear such great pressure and stop the operation of the port. The buzzing sound of electric current was extremely obvious in the silent sound of the waves. Chenong could already see some tiny electric lights jumping between the iron railing and other conductors. This kind of disorderly and extremely chaotic current frequency was enough to short-circuit any electronic product. Chenong was no stranger to this kind of reaction. Electromagnetic pulse, directed energy weapons, dozens of white phosphorus incendiary bombs fell from the sky. The hellish weapons dropped by fighter jets from several kilometers high in the sky left hundreds of brilliant trails in the air. It was a high-temperature white flame that was thousands of degrees Celsius, falling from the sky like a meteor shower. An orange-yellow trail flew over from afar. At a low altitude, a scorching heat wave and vibration could be felt. Almost in an instant, hundreds of white phosphorus incendiary bombs were gathered together by the orange-yellow man on fire. The blazing flame distorted the air like another more dazzling sun in the sky. At that moment, the thunderbolt flame swooped down from the sky. Tens of thousands of poisonous white phosphorus flames wrapped around him like 10,000 stars. The air around Chenong was directly hit by the shock wave and exploded with a loud bang. The powerful shock wave hit Chenong, and the sky seemed to have turned into a swamp that pressed down on him. The mud was sticky under the heavy pressure. Stupid, Chenong was not affected by the air resistance. He just stretched out his right hand and pressed on the somewhat condensed air in front of him. The silk-like gravitational force was like a flexible palm, passing through his right hand through the wrinkled void and transferring power to the front of the thunderbolt. The hand touched and clenched, and the heavy and thick cloth that was like a curtain was torn from the middle. The invisible air was torn open by this huge force. It could be seen with the naked eye that the blazing white flame in the air seemed to have been sucked dry of the air in the center. It suddenly exploded from the center, as if a huge red flower was ignited in an instant. The thunderbolt screamed as it was hit by the void that was torn by the gravitational force. The controlling force that was evenly distributed on the particles instantly tore his flame body apart, causing him to fall head first. Chun Ong twirled the seemingly substantial field line in his finger. It was as if, in the void, the dimensional line that represented gravity had been stirred, causing the friction of the matter several kilometers around him to increase by a tiny bit. The constituent molecules of the matter were slightly rubbing against each other in this gravitational wave. Dozens of fighters on high alert lost control at the same time. The friction coefficient of the key parts on the fighter jet had a slight change that could not be detected. Human cutting-edge weapons hit New York Harbor without fighting back, and several fighters fell between Chun-Ong and S.H.I.E.L.D.'s combat forces. The parts broke into thousands of pieces and collided with each other on the ground, creating countless sparks and eventually igniting the fuel tank. Chun-Ong was very close to the fighter. He felt the sparks in front of him and pressed down with his right palm. He didn't care about such an explosion. The flames of the explosion burst out, and then the vector was distorted by the strong gravitational force and spewed out in the opposite direction. The torrent of flames suddenly produced a rippled vibration, mixed with deadly debris, and rushed to the opposite S.H.I.E.L.D. agent. "Get down!" Coulson threw Nick down cleanly, and the flying steel brushed past them. The two slid a few meters away on the ground and hid behind a solid bunker. Coulson struggled to get up on one knee. His left hand was cut from his shoulder to his elbow, and his back was cut by titanium alloy parts. At this time, it was already bloody. The stone man knocked away the Statue of Liberty and fell heavily to the ground from several floors high. His body, which was as hard as a diamond, was torn open by gravity through his waist and abdomen. The hard concrete ground on the ground exploded violently, and the concrete mixed with steel fragments was thrown up from the ground like bullets. The torrent of mud broke through this layer of obstruction and poured out. It was like the sky and the earth were turned upside down. Everyone's soles became the top of their heads, and the mud under their feet poured down like a waterfall. Limited to 1 kilometer around Chun-Ang's body, the sky and the earth were turned upside down. The gravitational force that originally bound the material soil was turned into a repulsive and centrifugal force. Hundreds of millions of tons of huge mud wrapped everything on it and poured up like a huge mud pillar rushing out of the ground. Tall buildings shattered and the army collapsed. At this moment, Chun-Ong was suddenly silent around him. Only the sound of the mudslide rushing into the sky could be heard. It floated higher and higher, higher and higher, until it reached a height of hundreds of meters, so that the entire New York City could see the huge torrent of mud rising into the sky. With a slight press of Chun-Ang's right hand, it poured on the ground. Chapter 176. Chun-Ong stood on the Statue of Liberty and looked down at the ruins. From the New York Harbor to the Hudson River, broken concrete and tumbling earth formed a wasteland. Broken rocks, messy steel, and corpses dotted the wasteland. Everything that used to be on this land had disappeared. The army, the agents, the bunkers, and the buildings, they were buried under billions of tons of soil and were sucked into the millstone made of concrete and rock. Their bodies were smashed to pieces, and their flesh seeped out of the soil, dyeing the ground dark red. Chun-Ong had wiped out nearly 4 levels of S.H.I.E.L.D. elites with a flip of his hand. Many outstanding agents and soldiers had fought with the hope of victory, but all they received was death. Chun-Ong stood above freedom and trampled on honor and faith. Around him, death and despair were everywhere. A suffocating sadness pervaded the entire battlefield. Although there was only one target, this conflict had already surpassed the scope of crime or attack. It had become a war between a man and a country. On the other side, around the battlefield, the New Yorkers who saw this war felt a violent shock. The Pentagon, which was monitoring this place through satellites and electronic equipment, was also deathly silent. When the pillar of soil soared into the sky, all of New York saw it, and when it landed, the entire city felt it. A large stone hand lifted up the huge concrete slab buried above his head. The stone golem used its body to protect Sue as it crawled back to the surface. Mr. Miracle came out from the other side, and Thunderflame also flew back. Seeing this bitter battlefield, he suddenly became speechless. "Oh my God!" Sue covered his mouth. "Did you call me?" Chun-Ong floated in front of them. "What did we do? What did you do?" Mr. Miraculous, Reed, looked around in fear. He asked in a trembling voice, "Look at what you've done. Is this what you want?" "Yes," Chun-Ong replied calmly. "Perhaps you think I'm a butcher, but from my point of view, this isn't something difficult to accept. Is life worthy of respect? Of course it is. But for me, life doesn't represent the survival of the body, but a more fundamental manifestation. Death is merely the cycle of life. There was no need to cover up the hypocrisy and darkness. They are only embarking on a journey of life. But you killed them, Reed said angrily. You killed thousands of soldiers who had loved ones and children. You personally destroyed the happiness of thousands of families. I'm sorry, but does it have any special meaning to me? Chenong tilted his head and asked. He manipulated gravity to push away the pile of dirt beside him, revealing a young face. In nature, trees grow and wither with each passing year. Would you be upset because you plucked a flower early? Next season, it will grow again. Life is the same. The young corpse buried in the soil suddenly coughed violently. He struggled out of the ground and looked at everything in front of him blankly. When he saw Chun Ang's iconic mask, he raised the automatic rifle in his hand in surprise. Does time have any meaning? Chenong shook his head. No. The wounds on the resurrected soldier's face quickly disappeared, and he became younger. He looked at the rifle in his hand in surprise, as if he did not understand why he was wearing a military uniform. Is death worth fearing? It is not. The soldier's height suddenly shrank. He looked as young as a high school student. His eyes still had the sloppiness and unruliness of young people, and some tattoos of vulgarities appeared on his arms. If the truth of the world is revealed to you, you will find that life is like a small segment on a timeline. You will realize that life is like a small segment in a timeline. If a point on it disappears, it will be meaningless to the entire segment of life. Chenong looked into Reed's eyes and suddenly said, Since you feel guilty, uneasy, and remorseful because of this, I will give you a chance. A pop-up window appeared in front of Reed. Do you want to read the archive? If you choose yes, everything will return to how it was before. Everything will return to how it was 3 days ago, and so will your memories. Chenong pointed at his head and said, yes or no. Reed could already see that the young soldier had returned to his childhood. He was wearing a large military uniform, and his small face was filled with confusion. He looked only 7 or 8 years old, then 5 or 6 years old, 3 or 4 years old, and finally turned into a baby and disappeared. He stood before the pop-up window helplessly, and the world suddenly felt incredibly surreal. This huge sense of alienation seemed to have sucked him dry. Even the voice of his girlfriend beside him seemed unreal. He was in a trance and extremely confused. He felt like there was a voice in his heart telling him, 11 times. Reed. His girlfriend's voice seemed to come from beyond the sky, distorted and unclear. He did not know where this extreme impulse came from, but he fiercely slapped the no option. His expression was terrifyingly savage, and it even scared Sue. Reed, wake up. Don't look into that demon's eyes. Sue held Reed's head. You've chosen 11 times. Have you finally changed this time? Chenong nodded. Well, 11 times. Reed pushed away Sue's support. You're saying that the timeline has been adjusted 11 times? You're saying that I've returned to the past, and then stood here and made the same choice? Over and over again? Until now? You can't fool me. You can't fool me. This is illogical. Reed roared. Humans can't return to the past. Reed's face was terrifyingly gloomy, and he said firmly, Not in other worlds, but this world is different. Chenong was wearing a mask, and his tone was unusually calm. The savage expression on Reed's face was terrifying. He was completely destroyed. Sue hugged him tightly and kept reminding him, Don't look into his eyes. Don't look into his eyes. Everything is just an illusion. Don't fall into his trap. Did you see that option window? Reed asked her in surprise. What option window? Sue was stunned for a moment. When she understood, she pressed her forehead against Reed's head and said softly, Don't believe what you see. Don't believe your memories. And don't believe that demon's words. Trust me. After a while, Reed finally calmed down. He gently kissed Sue and whispered, I believe in you. Sue excitedly hugged Reed in her arms and sobbed. You finally defeated him. Do you know how scared I was? That person was like a demon playing with us. It was like you were possessed just now. Reed hugged Sue, but he said inwardly, I'm sorry, Sue. He's not the one who failed, but me. I was defeated by him. I need to find the truth, or I'll fail for the rest of my life. He's not destroying us, nor is he fighting against us. He's choosing time and creating the world. He knows his influence on the outcome and direction of this world. He's controlling the world. Our past, present, and future are just a timeline in his eyes, a process and outcome that he can control. I'm sorry, Sue. I won't allow our world to be played by him like a game where he can load at will. I won't allow him to deny the meaning of our existence and the dignity of our lives. Even if I do this and think this is what he wants, I will fight to the end. For our freedom to exist, I will fall into the darkness to search for the light. Reed let go of Sue's hand and slashed the back of her neck. Sue's eyes rolled back, and she fainted in Reed's arms. "Reed, what are you doing?" Thunderflame was shocked. Reed handed Sue over to him and sneered. "Get lost. You bunch of ants." Reed, the rock golem, wanted to charge forward, but he was restrained by the powerful gravity. Reed walked behind Chun-Ong step by step, silently looking at his former companion. His blue Fantastic Four uniform was gradually dyed with darkness. The deep black fabric extended from his shoulders, dragging a long cape behind him. The former Mr. Fantastic, Reed, wrapped in a sinister black robe, stood behind Chun-Ong and looked coldly at his companion. "Divine Lord, S.H.I.E.L.D. has other plans," Reed explained to Chun-Ong. "In order to deal with you, they invited the founder of S.H.I.L.D., Pym, and Tony Stark to develop a new weapon against Skynet. Now that all of New York knows about the commotion here, many superheroes will be rushing over. You're truly a talent to be able to join my doomsday church," Chun-Ong praised. Chapter 177. What was Pym doing? How could Chun-Ong not know? As early as a week ago, S.H.I.E.L.D. agents came to Chun-Ang's laboratory at Oscorp Industries. Chun-Ang's identity was clear, and naturally, there was nothing for S.H.I.E.L.D. to be wary of. Directly modifying the world's bottom records through arcane spells involving divinity was not something that S.H.I.E.L.D. could find out. This was also an area where Chun-Ang's arcane and scientific theories had not been unified. In the fields of space and time, cause and effect, concepts, rituals, and souls, knowledge of arcane spells and divinity were still too difficult for science. If Skynet's technological resources were used, Chun-Ong would probably have to break through the dimensional level to interfere with information if he wanted to modify the world line. Doing so would probably be no different from opening up a new timeline. This was also the reason why Chun-Ang's scientific theories related to space and time and planes were far superior to the basic technology tree. He had an extreme advantage in this regard. Because of his studies in the D&D world, the study of divinity, planes, and arcane spells, Chun-Ong could now easily do this with his extraordinary divine power. To create a real Chun-Ong in this world with flesh and blood, real and unreal, with a complete life experience, and even a very clear human memory, a true identity that could withstand investigation. It was precisely because of these clean and brilliant life experiences that S.H.I.E.L.D. agents were attracted. Chun-Ang's academic level was really too high. He had amazing achievements in information technology, basic physics, space physics, energy physics, and mathematics, and could be called a world-shaking talent. He had his own laboratory at Oscorp Industries, and Oscorp was now an asset of Skynet. After that, there was Chun-Ang's suggestion at S.H.I.E.L.D., as well as the subsequent exchange with Pym. We hope that the two of you can work together to complete this scientific research mission. Nick Fury said sincerely to Chun-Ong and Pym, who were sitting in front of him. He handed the documents in his hand to them. "I know that both of you don't want your research to be used to kill people, but this time, we're not here to kill. We're here to save." He turned to Hank Pym and said, "The hostile takeover of Pym technology is related to this incident. Dr. Doom and his Skynet are destroying the foundation of the entire country. We have reason to believe that the hostile takeover of PIM technology and Osborne Industries in the past few days was controlled by Dr. Doom. Our country is in an abnormal state. It needs your wisdom. Even as the director of S.H.I.E.L.D., Nick could make a move on those anomalies in tights. However, he did not dare to criticize such a strategic-level scientist. Even without mentioning the giant corporations behind them, just their influence alone was not to be underestimated. Pym is an authority on microphysics and one of the founders of S.H.I.L.D., while Chenong is another all-field scientific research hegemon. Pym particles are very dangerous. Hank squinted at Nick and sneered, "Don't talk to me about national justice. When I was fighting for my country, you were still sucking on your mother's milk. You're protecting the peace of the United States, and I'm banning the further application of PIM particles. I'm protecting the safety of the universe. Your greedy eyes only see its power, but do you have a clear understanding of its danger?" Nick could not say that he was not a competent director of S.H.I.L.D., but he was a politician after all, and he could not think from the perspective of a scientist. The first lesson of every researcher in an experiment must be the baptism of safety and morality. The better the scientist, the more cautious they would be about their own research, because it could destroy the world. Not all scientists were like Chenong, who had many samples of the world to study. There was only one world for them. No matter how crazy they were, they had to have scruples. "How do you plan to use our wisdom?" Chenong asked as he closed the document. Nick heard Chun Ang's words. He was instantly excited. Not rejecting immediately was the best answer. He replied cautiously, "We plan to use Dr. Pym's mature design, the Ant-Man miniaturized combat suit, and select the best agents to use and operate it, using the energy weapons created by you, Dr. Nonsense." Chenong interrupted him. "Don't insult my invention with such a stupid design. Do you think humans are the best creatures at war? Why do you want to fight in a stupid suit? Two of the world's greatest scientists are standing here, and you plan to let them do the work of a weapon designer." Chenong sneered. "Nick, you're very bold. What's your plan? Let Pym adjust his tights, and then install my micro-interference ray on it? Why don't you find a university student to do the job? I could do that when I was 6. Pym added with an ugly expression. "So the two of you are?" Nick could not react. Chenong nodded. "We agree, but all the research process and interference rights are under our control. What about safety?" "Everything is under control." Nick wanted to swear. "You're the one who said that the research is safe, and you're the one who said that everything is under control. You're the one who set the standard." But he did not dare to say this out loud. He obediently brought the two masters who he could not afford to offend. Back at S.H.I.E.L.D., a secret laboratory. What was Pym's particle? No one knew this better than Chenong. Nominally, it was a special separated subatomic particle that could change the size of the mass of living things. But in fact, the mass of the object had changed after Pym's particle was adjusted. An Ant-Man could sit on an ant, and a tank could be hung on its waist. If their mass was not changed, then the density of the human body and the tank would be comparable to the planetary matter of a white dwarf. According to the pressure formula, if the mass remained the same but the area of force changed and the pressure increased, then the smaller Ant-Man would definitely cut into the Earth's core. Therefore, changing the mass without changing the momentum, reducing the weight while still maintaining the dynamic potential energy of a large volume of mass, cannot be explained by reducing the distance between atoms. Any interstellar civilization that could explore white dwarfs and neutron stars would have in-depth research on atomic distance. But no civilization had ever been able to complete such a magical subatomic particle. So, Pym's particle is essentially the interference of another dimensional state. It can transform objects into a parallel dimension in a certain way. Chenong observed the structure of Pym's particle on the quantum scanner and discussed with Dr. Hank. Yes, Dr. Hank looked curiously at the experimental equipment that Chun Ong moved to S.H.E.L.D. and explained to Chenong, "I call this parallel dimension the cosmic dimension. The collapse and filling of matter also originate from this dimension. Objects that are shrunk are not shrunk in the physical sense, but are transformed into a parallel dimension with us. You've discovered the other side of matter, the properties of their relative space-time dimensions. Chun Ong exclaimed, the number of spatial dimensions, the number of aspects of matter in the dimension. Dimensions are endless, so the dimensional properties of matter are also endless. It's a miracle to be able to find such a special dimension in infinity. Chun Ong took out an arm-sized ray meter and aimed it at the ant in the petri dish. The slightly white ray hit the petri dish and passed through the middle. A reddish-brown monster, covered in a carapace, waved its claws and fangs in place. It was a monster shaped like an ant. The alarm in the laboratory was pulled, and the shrill alarm rang throughout the base. "Doctor, come with us." S-H-I-L-D. Agents rushed out from the side and nervously aimed at the monster-like ant. There was a red ant the size of a car, like a real monster, with a grotesque appearance and carapace. The red ant weakly shook its tentacles in place. The agents protecting Chun Ong wanted to pull him out, but Chun Ong refused. "It's okay, it won't live long." Chun Ong waved his hand, and as if to prove his words, the red ant fell to the ground and twitched as it died. Although the existence of a different dimension could overcome many impossibilities of life, it was still limited by the environment. The inharmonious conflict between the life of a different dimension and this dimension could not be reconciled or overcome. It was fine for a temporary existence of a different dimension like the Ant-Man, but if it was a permanent other dimensionalization, death was almost inevitable in a short period of time. As long as creatures still needed to communicate with the environment, this kind of dimensional attribute conflict would inevitably lead to collapse and death. If the ant was magnified 70 times, then its surface area would increase by 5,000 times, and its body mass that consumed oxygen would increase by at least 350,000 times. Even if the ant could breathe on the surface of its body, it needed an environment with a concentration of up to 90% of oxygen, or an increase of 70 times of oxygen supply. There were many similar difficulties. The other dimensionalization could make its carapace and muscles relatively mutate in terms of attributes, but it could not change the nature of oxygen. Therefore, Chun Ong did not have to worry about the enlarged ant monster, because as time passed, it would kill itself. "That's why my uniform exists." Pym sighed. His Ant-Man uniform was used to create an environment that humans could adapt to in order to resist the disharmony and environmental conflicts. However, this was only a temporary measure. Long-term use of the Ant-Man battlesuit would still harm the human body's health. Pym also said goodbye to his superhero career because of this, leaving behind the legend of the famous home tyrant. Chun Ong looked at the dead giant ant and shook his head. There have always been other ways. If the environment can't adapt to the giant ant, then let it adapt to the environment. Modern biological modification technology is enough to let them live long enough. Life modification? Pym was shocked. That's crazy. S-H-I-E-L-D will not agree to such a terrible experiment. And the current biotechnology is not enough to let these insects adapt to human combat power. They may be able to survive, but if you want them to use their dangerous characteristics, that's a big mistake. That's not necessarily true. Chun Ong shook his head. Yes, that's not necessarily true. Nick hurried in from outside the lab and said sincerely to Chun Ong, S-H-I-L-D supports your experiment. To be continued. Chapter 178. Collapsed high-rise buildings, exposed steel bars, and occasionally burning steel chariots. Melted steel and corpses mixed together and mixed in the soil paved the road from New York Harbor to the Statue of Liberty. Looking up, there were ruins and wreckage of the city everywhere, as if the last cries of thousands of souls buried here could still be heard. The arrival of the apocalypse reminded the world of the long-lost fear. In this silent ruin, the black blood mud suddenly collapsed into a huge whirlpool. Hundreds of tons of mud were swallowed by the huge mouth that seemed to never be filled until a huge pit tens of meters deep was created. The soil near the surface suddenly bulged, and a dirty, muddy hand reached out from this huge grave. Nick Fury and Coulson climbed out of the soil with difficulty. The experimental Ant-Man combat suits they wore saved their lives. With the help of their reduced size, they successfully avoided the most terrible impact. In the end, they could even use the PIM particles on the combat suits to shrink the soil layer on their bodies and escape. But Nick would rather die in this disaster. He looked around, his expression blank and confused. His once strong and powerful hands could only tremble at this time. This man who was as unyielding as steel seemed to have lost his soul, and his body instantly became a lot thinner. Nick Fury, you idiot. Congratulations, you've performed a disastrous defeat in front of the whole world. Right in the center of New York, you've shown us an overwhelming war, and you're the loser. The Secretary of State's curses came from the headset built into the helmet, and obscenities rained down on him. Fire at me. Nick's tone was bitter. What did you say? Do you think your death can wash away the shame of the country? S.H.I.E.L.D.'s backup plan. If there's an enemy that threatens the survival of the country, S.H.I.E.L.D. has the right to launch the final response plan. As the director, I order you to launch the final defense plan D. Let me and the enemy perish together. I don't understand what you're saying. The Secretary of State roared in the headset, but soon a cold electronic voice replaced him. D-Plan is starting, submitting to the mainframe for confirmation. Request approved. Nick took off his helmet and closed his eyes. Facing the sea breeze, he felt the breath of Chun-Ong, who was floating on the Statue of Liberty. It was as if he had used up his last breath. You coward! You dare to attack a soldier! You dare to make a move on our young man! His trembling shell seemed to be filled with courage once again. He threw away the coat of weakness and roared like a warrior. Are you ready to meet your end? He was like a lion with messy hair, and his eyes were like the fierce gaze of a wounded beast as he looked at Chun-Ong. They wanted to tear him apart, make him suffer. He wanted to destroy him. The PIM particle is a very terrifying weapon. It can destroy everything in existence, including nuclear weapons, cities, and even planets and stars. It's more dangerous than any weapon you can imagine. This shouldn't be a weapon that humans can control, because in the hands of humans, it's more dangerous than any supercriminal. When Pym developed this weapon, he had solemnly said this to Nick. It's a weapon that humans can only use in the most dangerous times. Chun-Ong added, it's not for human civil war. It's not to fight for power or even to threaten other governments. It should only be activated when humans are on the brink of life and death. I think it should be an astronomical disaster that can destroy the Earth, or an alien invasion at the level of an interstellar fleet. I co-created it with Dr. Pym. The preconditions are the miraculous PIM particle that Dr. Pym discovered and the microinterference ray that I discovered. The PIM particle can transfer matter from the original space-time dimension to another space-time dimension, and the microinterference ray has a locked interference frequency, effectively limiting the interference range, intensity, and other specific data of the ray. Pym continued, I created a monster, and Dr. Chun put it in a cage so that you can use it in a limited way. This will allow you to make limited use of it, but I must emphasize that during this process, danger still exists. Looking at Nick's solemn but still indifferent expression, Pym felt that he had made a mistake. The best way to preserve such a terrifying weapon was not to create it. He personally hung the sword of Spardax over the human's head. If it wasn't for Chun-Ang's scientific theory that tempted him, he would never have created such a thing. Chun-Ong pointed at a huge ray generator and said to Nick, the microinterference ray can control the interference range, intensity, and even the result of the ray. Its accuracy can even reach the level of interfering with 1 grain of iron out of 100,000 grains of sand. If the PIM particle exists in the form of a microinterference ray, then it can destroy any matter in the universe. In the S.H.I.E.L.D. building not far from New York Harbor, densely packed cables extracted a huge amount of energy from the arc's reaction. The ray generator that Chun-Ong had personally created at the top slowly began to operate. Dense blue energy gathered in the energy room, pressurizing the Pym particle and transforming it into an active subatomic form. In Chen Ang's opinion, Pym's greatest invention wasn't the Pym particle, but the container that contained the Pym particle. This substance that could not be shrunk was the key to the application of the Pym particle. However, in the face of the increasing energy intensity and the exponential increase in the energy level of the ray, the strength of this substance was somewhat insufficient. An operator accidentally touched a low-energy Pym particle, and then he disappeared in front of everyone's eyes. Some of the surrounding objects began to disappear, as if there was an invisible hole in the air. The ray was finally fired from the generator, and a dim white light shot directly at the Statue of Liberty. After enjoying the repeated nightmares of heaven and earth, the few people present were once again fortunate enough to witness another great achievement of mankind's self-destruction. It was a terrifying power that was enough to wipe out this young race, this tiny planet, from the universe 1,000,000 times over. This kind of scene would only appear in nightmares. Even disaster movies couldn't imagine this kind of terrifying power. A huge depression appeared in the chest of the Statue of Liberty. Then, it only took 200,000th of a second to expand to a diameter of 1 kilometer. Because of the microinterference device, it was finally limited to the narrow range of New York Harbor. All the matter in this area collapsed into discrete particles. It was as if they were being attracted by an irresistible and powerful gravitational force with the Statue of Liberty as the center. These matters barely maintained their original forms and wrapped around the center to form a huge ball of matter. Liquefied gas, scattered soil, concrete, and even corpses were compressed into a ball. Then, in a short period of time calculated in nanoseconds, it collapsed into a huge black hole. Everything disappeared from this world. Everything that could be observed in the neat spherical space with a diameter of 1 kilometer evaporated without a trace. At that moment, even light couldn't escape. Chapter 179. Everything is over. When a microinterference ray carried Pym particles and swept across Nick, the thoughts in his mind were very long. This was his only thought, which made him give up resistance and calmly float in the air. Yenef, after paying such a high price, everything is finally over. People often say that when you die, you have time to review your life from your mind, recall the past, laughter, sadness, anger, and regret. I used to think it was a white lie. Now I know it's true. I thought so too. Carlson, is that you? Heaven really exists. Nick said in surprise. I'm afraid it doesn't exist, sir. Carlson's helpless voice came from his side. Nick raised his head and asked in confusion why. Because I saw Satan. Nick couldn't describe his feelings at the moment he saw Chenong. In the middle of a large pit with a diameter of thousands of meters deep, the person he never wanted to see was suspended. Seawater poured down from the gap behind him, forming a huge waterfall thousands of meters high behind him. The magma at the bottom of the pit evaporated the seawater. Hundreds of tons of seawater drifted under Chenong like mist. Chenong stood in the middle, behind the mist, ethereal like he didn't come from the human world. You seem surprised. Chenong waved his hand gently, brushing away the mist between them. You think it's incredible that I survived in this situation, right? You're even more surprised that you're unscathed. The reason is simple. Everything you do is under the control of Skynet. What you said, what you did, the plans and actions you thought were secret, including the illusion that everything is under control. Which of these were not imposed by me? Freedom is a big lie. From the day I came to this world, it didn't exist. Chenong looked at Nick Fury seriously. After this time, I'm going to kill you. You will reconsider the relationship between us. Because war is always the fastest way to establish and stabilize a new order. In the process of establishing communication and cooperation between us, more blood and pain will be needed until you understand. I have the determination and power to destroy you. As Chun Ang's voice faded, Nick Fury saw magma spewing out from the depths of the sinkhole beneath them. The crimson metal liquid drowned the rocks at the bottom of the sinkhole and evaporated the huge amount of seawater falling from the sky. Countless rolling metal liquids cooled into silver liquid, flowing along the sinkhole under the control of an invisible force. "You won't get away with this," Nick said, breaking free. Chun-Ong controlled Nick's head and directed it towards the bottom of the sinkhole. It even dispelled the steaming mist in the middle, allowing him to clearly see what was happening below. A large amount of minerals and high-purity metals gushed out from the depths of the earth in the form of molten liquid. They were purified and assimilated by the silver metal liquid. They transformed into a large number of liquid metal robots. A strange octagonal mechanical body was formed from these liquid robots, forming a precise and stable skeleton. Large amounts of fine metals filled in the missing flesh, and in the span of a few breaths, a mechanical body brimming with a fantastical style was molded beneath Nick's eyes. Nick had heard that these precious minerals were more abundant in the depths of the earth than on the surface. The metal existed in the mantle layer and the core layer in the form of magma. He had witnessed the authenticity of the rumor with his own eyes. After the completion of the magnetic control well, tens of thousands of tons of molten metal gushed out of the wellhead. Nick finally understood the truth behind Skynet. The massive amount of metal was consumed by the silver liquid robot's self-replication, replaced by flowing silver liquid that slowly flowed over the bottom of the huge crater and covered the exposed rocks. His face turned pale. From the traces of Skynet to everything that was happening in front of him, he finally understood that he had made a huge mistake. He habitually placed the UA government on the side of strength, believing that the UA was the dominant force on Earth. However, he had never considered the consequences of facing an enemy with overwhelming strength. The blue light, representing cold fusion, lit up again at the bottom of the giant pit, and the nuclear matter continuously extracted from the core was transformed into a powerful energy source in a magnetic field binding furnace. From the repeated catastrophes to the formation of the giant sinkhole, it was not a long time. Many active superheroes in New York had just arrived. This kind of calamity-level disaster frightened New Yorkers. The huge sinkhole was a constant reminder that they had once again brushed shoulders with the Grim Reaper. What happened here? Spider-Man looked down from the edge of the giant pit. The sensitive senses from the spider immediately made him feel the chill of the hair standing on end. The slight vibration of the ground and a little bit of steam from the mouth of the giant pit were enough to make him realize that it was not simple inside. There was a creepy sense of danger. "I feel something inside," Peter said to Super Daredevil, who arrived later. Super Daredevil, who had lost his vision, had his other senses greatly enhanced. His bat-like vision was even unaffected by the darkness and other factors, allowing him to spy on the specific situation of the enemy. "I'm chasing after Kingpin. A few weeks ago, I found out that there was a problem with Kingpin's gang. I suspect that Kingpin might be dead." Peter was shocked. "How could it be? Who did it?" "Someone scarier than him." Super Daredevil's tone was heavy. "Kingpin's men are afraid of that person. It's like a taboo. They would even rather be interrogated than mention that person's name. I think he should be related to Dr. Doom, who has become famous in recent months. Just yesterday, I had a very well-informed informant tell me that there will be a big operation here. That's troublesome. You've seen the situation here. This kind of destructive power is different from a small fight against crime. This is not something we should intervene in. Leave it to them to solve. If you're talking about agents..." Super Daredevil walked straight to the ruins on the side, pulled away a pile of concrete, and revealed the buried body below. "I think they're already here. Something big happened this time. I have to hurry." Before Peter could finish his words, a uniform mechanical sound came from the thick fog, and the ground shook regularly, as if thousands of horses were galloping. In the dim fog, countless shadows reflected the silver light, and the shadows covered the entire field of vision. Whoosh! A silver light rose from the deep pit into the sky and slid through the sky. The metal body shone under the sun, and it was unusually dazzling. In Spider-Man's dynamic vision, the streamlined aircraft was abnormally blurry in his retina. Even with such a powerful capture ability, he could only see a shadow of it. Before Peter could see it clearly, it disappeared without a trace. Chapter 180. Skynet was the best technological carrier that Chunong had painstakingly created. It was also one of the four elements that made up the universe. Chunong had positioned it as a qualified technological carrier that could realize any of his technologies. It represented the most advanced industrial production. Rather than saying Skynet was a technological civilization, it would be more accurate to say that it was the most advanced industrial system that Chunong had created. Starting from the most basic aspect of matter, it would be more accurate to say that it was the most advanced industrial system that Chunong had created. Therefore, what Skynet lacked the most was imagination and creativity based on perceptual intelligence. It was hard to say that this was not because of Chunong's intentions. After all, civilization was hard to control, but tools were different. However, this information that was important to a civilization and individual with a long history was meaningless to Earth civilization. This kind of intelligent subatomic energy could easily change its own gravitational force, electromagnetic force, strong force, and weak force. Although it was only a simple mutual force changeability, Skynet could already achieve any miracle that humans could imagine. It was just a simple technological construct. Chunong had even restricted Skynet's base to not bring out technology that was 20 years ahead of this world. However, the human army still suffered a crushing defeat under this attack. The combat power of the nanomachines that Skynet had reconstructed shook the entire world. The U.S. government's reaction speed was extremely fast. The Second Fleet had immediately headed for New York. Their powerful air defense and mobility forces allowed them to react immediately and quickly intervene in the operation. Delta, this is Command. The opponent is an extremely powerful robot army. I repeat, the opponent is an extremely powerful robot army. Our target is an extremely dangerous person with special abilities. He is under the protection of the robot army and possesses extremely powerful combat abilities. Codename, Dr. Doom. On a large transport plane high in the sky, the Delta Force was ready to go. New York was the largest and most prosperous city in the U.S. It had the most mobile and powerful anti-terrorist force in the entire U.S. They would be entering New York via airdrop. Command, this is Delta. The airdrop is in position. Ground personnel, please use laser guidance. Understood. Delta, our ground forces have been eliminated. The enemy's mechanized forces have blocked the closest ground support from 3 kilometers away. We are unable to provide you with any support. Please overcome this difficulty. We have suffered heavy casualties. Your person is of utmost importance. We cannot give up. Technicians will use the satellite to locate you. Latest intel, Delta, your target has been confirmed as a level X. Nuclear reaction detected at the location of the target. HQ wants you to abandon the target and return immediately. I repeat, return immediately. Before the Delta commander could react, he saw a flash of silver light high up in the sky. Outside the fighter jets that were protecting the large transport aircraft, 3 very strange aerodynamic aircraft entered the pilot's field of vision. Their speed was abnormally fast, and there was no response from the radar. The speed of the aircraft even exceeded the ability of the pilot to capture dynamic vision, leaving only a faint silver light on everyone's retinas. Delta? Delta? Ground Command Center calling Delta. From a hidden Ground Command Center, they could see a pale blue light flashing in the sky above New York Harbor. The orange fireball exploded in the air, and faint fireworks floated around. More than 20 aviation squads above New York lost contact at the same time. On the battlefield, countless such electric waves weaved and intertwined. The sky above the sinkhole was like a black hole, devouring the electromagnetic waves that passed by it. A large amount of dynamic real-time information was translated and played on the large screen in front of Nick. The underground command center on the screen was very lifelike. Even the highest commander of the government would not be able to understand the situation better than Nick. You have already won. Nick gasped. But what do you want to do? If you want to prove your power, swear that you have the power to do whatever you want. Then you have succeeded. SHIELD has suffered the most painful defeat in history. You stepped on our bodies and proved yourself. We can't do anything to you. If you want to destroy the world, then we have no choice but to fight you to the death. Are these tragedies, these tragic scenes your goal? If not, then what is your goal? The screen in front of Nick appeared the image of the Second Fleet. I'm not a terrorist, Chenong replied. I'm very curious why SHILD would treat me as a supervillain. Even in the universe, everything I have done to you is moral and legal. I have said before, your biggest illusion is that you think you are free, but you are not. Just like how you mistakenly think that you have sovereignty over Earth. But Earth and humans are my property. Nick's remaining, I stared at Chenong. He could barely control his anger and was almost trembling. Do you think you can do whatever you want just like that? You are very wrong. Humans are born free, never controlled or manipulated by anyone. We are not anyone's property. If someone dares to swear like that, I swear I will stuff his head into a beep. That is the truth. Chenong shook his head helplessly. Go to hell with the truth. Don't be naughty. Chenong controlled a steel needle to pierce Nick's skin. The blood was directed into the PIM particle ray stimulator. This strange subatomic device, combined with a microscope, could display D&D most clearly. Nick saw his cells magnified thousands of times. Under the scanner, the internal structure was abnormally clear. Let the truth speak, Chenong said. He clearly displayed Nick's chromosomes on the screen of the scanner. Humans seem to be unable to decipher the genetic information, but it is not only the deep information that has been marked. I have prepared some more intuitive marks. Just like how you like to put earrings on the cows and sheep you raise, Skynet's experimental animals also have their own marks. It is on the 23rd pair of chromosomes, which is your sex chromosomes. Nick's genetic map appeared on the screen in front of him. Even the most illiterate person could see that the genetic map would never appear on normal creatures. The appearance of animals and plants may have regular patterns, and it was not impossible for the same thing to happen to genes. Of course, this mark was exactly the same as Skynet's mark, but Nick could also find a reason to convince himself. For example, Chenong first discovered this regular pattern, and then used it as the mark of Skynet. But natural genes would never clearly write a line of words on their bodies in 3 languages, Chinese, Hippolyte, and Latin. Manufactured by Skynet's first star-swallowing base, serial number 198027. Chapter 181. The property of Skynet. Abduction must be investigated. The dazzling lines of text were exposed in front of Nick's eyes. Even if he wanted to ignore it, he couldn't. This line of bloody text was like a bone-scraping steel knife, stabbing his nerves. N is an element of, N is an element of. It denied the meaning of human existence. It subverted Nick's beliefs. It was right in front of Nick, laughing at the arrogance and blindness of human beings. The so-called primate of all beings, the so-called father's eldest son, all became a joke at this moment. It completely denied the meaning of natural human rights, equality, and freedom for all. It turned out that human beings were just an experiment of an intelligent program, but a creation of Chenong. This is fake. Nick struggled. He tried to stay calm, trying to find all the flaws, and soon he thought he saw through Chenong's lies. A genetic map can be forged. You can write a code based on the laws of human genes, just like drawing a target on the spot where an arrow will land. You've chosen a method that can achieve this effect based on the laws of human genes. With Skynet's computing speed, it's not difficult to achieve this. This is the result of a combination of coincidence and your careful planning. Your biggest loophole is the use of these 3 languages, Chinese characters, and even simplified characters. Simplified Chinese characters were created by the Chinese government in the last century. How could the creator of the world use the language of the future? Nick spoke faster and faster. His voice even trembled, and his expression was mixed with fear and excitement. He was bound in the air by an invisible gravitational force. But at this time he broke free from this invisible force and shouted in his most determined tone, "You are trying to deceive me, but you can't do it. You are not God." The last sentence, Nick shouted with a roar. Ong did not stir up any waves because of his impulsiveness. He said in a calm and unquestionable tone, "You are trying to deceive me, but you can't do it. You are not God." Hebrew for let there be light. As the commander of S.H.I.L.D., it was impossible for Nick not to know this sentence. Perhaps because it was too shocking, Nick could not help but be stunned. There was no emotion in Ang's eyes. Looking down at him from above, when he finally reacted, Nick frantically tried to attack Ong with his teeth. His remaining eye looked like it was about to burst into flames. His face was terrifyingly hideous. He was enraged by Ang's words, even angrier than before. "This is blasphemy. This is blasphemy. You are not him. You are the devil. It was a demon, an ancient serpent. You're not him, no." Nick screamed at the top of his lungs. He opened his mouth wide and screamed without manners, his cries filled with despair. Ong did not make a sound, but Nick was struggling with all his might. On one side, he was crazily moving, and on the other side, he was frozen. Nick tried to find a trace of guilt, fear, or pride from Ang's face, but he did not. Ong was indifferent and calm. Nick clenched his teeth, and his neck was full of protruding veins. He raised his head with difficulty, and his eyes met with the cold eyes. It was already dusk, and behind Ong, the sun slowly rose. Light shone on the ground, but Nick's heart was filled with darkness. The sun is rising from the west. On the screen, the citizens of New York were either terrified or curious as they looked to the west. This is white night, right? An astronomical phenomenon similar to a mirage. Someone tried to explain, but soon the rumor collapsed. The sun rose higher and higher until it was noon, and the center of the sky covered the entire New York City. Even the entire Western Hemisphere was illuminated. Under the hot sun, Nick was cold and shivering. His struggling became more and more intense, but he could not get rid of the invisible shackles. He could only look at Ong with resentment and resentment. Nick's eyes became more and more resentful. He viciously quoted from the Bible, "Through death on the cross. The one who corrupts the power of death is the devil, and release those who have been slaves for their entire lives because of fear of death. May the precious blood of the Lord prevail. May the holy name of the Lord prevail. May the Holy Spirit manifest its power and eliminate all the deeds of the devil." The army in the distance finally entered New York Harbor. The aircraft carriers and battleships of the Second Fleet aimed their cannons here. The most powerful war weapons of mankind easily knocked away the fishing boats and cargo ships that were blocking the sea route. The 127mm diameter cannons rotated on the deck. The cold pain of death almost drowned Nick, but he still had the energy to look at the screen. Seeing that the fleet had aimed their cannons here, Nick turned his head and roared at the sea, "No!" On the sea, General Ross had already given a cold order: "Carpet attack, clean every inch of land here. Don't let a single rat escape." The fleet sent a signal, "Ready." The cannons all turned their muzzles, adjusting the elevation and other data according to the parameters. "Calibrate and fire." The muzzle of the flagship let out a deafening roar, and the entire New York City could hear the muffled sound. The huge metal cannonball hit the energy shield outside of Skynet's base and stopped bit by bit in front of Nick's ferocious gaze. Light blue ripples spread on the energy shield, and the bullet that reflected the metallic luster floated quietly above Nick and Ang's heads. All the battleships of the fleet on the other side adjusted their muzzles at the same time, aiming at Ang's position according to the calibration data. "Fire." "No." Ong stretched out his left hand in the direction of the Second Fleet. Before Nick could finish his sentence, Ang's fingers had already begun to bend, and he gripped the air. Screech. The ear-piercing noise made Nick bend over in pain. It was the sound of steel being twisted. As Ong gripped the air with his right hand, a battleship was twisted into a pile of scrap metal by an invisible force, as if it was in his palm. The keel let out a noise that could not bear the weight, and the outer layer of the metal plate caved in like a thin piece of paper. As the two ends of the battleship twisted crazily, the entire battleship was twisted into a dough twist. Flesh and blood splattered out of the solid hull, and the sound of an explosion came from the cabin that had no gaps. Nick was so angry that his eyes were about to split open. He broke free from the pressure that weighed several tons. Dumb F***CK. How dare you curse God? Chun Ong slapped Nick with the back of his hand. Nick's body slammed on the shell of the energy shield like a rag. On the surface of the sea where the Second Fleet was, a huge amount of seawater shot up into the sky. The entire New York Harbor and even the Hudson River shot up into the sky. Hundreds of millions of tons of seawater covered the sky, forming a giant hand that was hundreds of meters tall in the air, dragging the Second Fleet in its hand. Cries of despair came from the dozens of battleships. Everything happened too suddenly. The battleships that were still firing at the same time were suddenly crushed into pieces of metal. Before the other battleships of the Second Fleet could react, they were already in the water curtain that covered the sky. There was panic on the battleships. As the sky closed over their heads bit by bit, the cries of fear spread to the entire fleet. Nick's eyes were wide open, and his hair stood on end. Kill me. Kill me first if you have the guts. What's the point of competing with a bunch of ordinary people? Devil, take my soul. The giant hand formed by the seawater slowly closed and clenched into a tight fist. The entire Second Fleet was submerged in the seawater and was tightly wrapped up. The air vapor turned into a large amount of foam that seeped out of the seawater, but the fleet remained in the seawater. The giant fist slowly sank into the ground and turned back into the sea, but the surface of the sea was empty. The blue sea was calm, and there was no trace of human existence. Through the clear seawater, dozens of huge steel and iron artifacts could be seen faintly in the seawater. Chun Ong looked at everything coldly. Under Nick's stunned gaze, he gently shook his right hand and retracted it. He then changed his hand and stretched out his left hand in the direction of New York City. The earth shook slightly. Nick collapsed to the ground powerlessly. His heart ached to the bone. He struggled and begged, "My Lord, we've all sinned. My Lord, please forgive my sins, just like the sins of others. Let me receive the gift of the Lord and the salvation of my soul. We don't want to be tempted. Save us from evil." A powerful gravitational wave was transmitted from Chun Ang's left hand, sweeping everything along the way. In the deep pit below them, the nuclear reaction material from the Earth's core gushed out along with the magma. In the direction where Chun Ang's left hand was pointing, it floated and melted into a blazing white fireball. The nuclear fission was reacting violently in the fireball. Following the gravitational wave controlled by Chun Ong, surging radiation energy and explosions blasted out. A dazzling light streaked across the sky of New York and hit the mechanized troops that were rushing over. It was as if another sun had set there. The New Yorkers covered their eyes with their hands. Chapter 182. The tragedy of the war that took place in New York shocked the world. This conflict between mankind and the Creator ended with the defeat of mankind. The UA shed a lot of blood and suffered the most terrible defeat since the attack on Pearl Harbor in World War II. The mysterious appearance of artificial intelligence and mechanical troops, the destruction of the Second United Fleet by supernatural forces, and even the reversal of heaven and earth in New York Harbor. Every detail of this war was carefully studied by the eyes of the world. The powerful lethality of the UA government's PIM ray, which was enough to wipe out the planet, was terrifying, but the mysterious force that beat the UA government in fancy ways was even more terrifying. Even the most arrogant UA government had to admit that this was a war against the UA and not a terrorist attack carried out by criminals. Because no terrorist attack could destroy the National Defense Army or even destroy the entire Second United Fleet, and there would be no terrorists detonating a nuclear war in New York. Although the UA government tried to cover it up, the fall of New York was already an unidentifiable fact. Except for the police and security, any military unit within 10 kilometers of New York would be destroyed. New York became the capital of freedom. Skynet robots and the police worked together to maintain law and order. Government officials and executives of large groups worked together to manage the city. It was a city that was half out of the control of the government. Although part of the functions of social security and city management were still in the hands of the government, the network, communication, and transportation were not blocked, but the taxes that represented sovereignty were collected by the major consortia. Skynet took up a considerable part of the responsibility of social management. They would kill any criminals mercilessly and maintain order in New York. However, the management function of dealing with humans was continued by the original government. Another part was taken over by Stark Industries, PIM Technology Group, Hammer Industries, Oscorp Industries, and dozens of other consortia. It was hard to imagine that the UA government would acquiesce to this situation. This made the outside world deeply understand that the blow suffered by the UA government was so serious that even national sovereignty was temporarily compromised. The accident investigation that happened in New York. Nick, what do you want to say? The World Security Council convened the highest inquiry meeting to discuss and question the current biggest threat to the security of the Earth. After Nick was released by Chun-Ong, the first to take over his life was not the UA government, but the World Security Council. Nick's spirit was still good, and the Earth Security Council still maintained a considerable amount of trust in him. This time, rather than saying it was an inquiry, it was more like an inquiry about Chun-Ang's situation. I want to see the gene map that I requested to be displayed. Nick raised his head and said firmly. The members of the Security Council looked at each other. After a long period of silence, the old man who questioned Nick finally said, "It's not that we don't trust you, but your evidence has driven many people crazy. We lost 4 A-class personnel because of your information." When the old man mentioned this matter, there was still a trace of guilt in his eyes. His face, which was like a granite sculpture, also showed some emotion. Even though the council members looked calm, it was obvious. It was unknown what kind of perilous waves this discovery had set off. Dozens of split screens appeared on the screen behind the board of directors. Each of them was a completely different set of genetic maps. We extracted 200,000 of the most representative genes in the world, from the latest artificial humans to the ancient races of the African continent, and compiled this map that covers the genes of all the races in the world. Its samples cover the vast majority of the inherent genes of humans, and it is the most representative genetic data of humans. Another white-haired council member explained. He looked at the struggling expression on Nick's face and said word by word, "Any human, whether he is a mutant, a cyborg, a new human, a mutant, a primitive, or even a savage, all human races. All the individuals tested have this logo, a paragraph of content marked in 3 languages, and the icon of Skynet. I personally extracted the genes of ancient humans found in Antarctica, China, and all over the American continent, and found this exact same text. On the genes extracted from the alien corpses preserved by the Council, we also found something. The dazzling gene map on the screen was replaced by a completely different map. From left to right, there were about 9 completely different genes. Some were triple helices, some were even made up of wheel-shaped genetic material, and the genes that most resembled humans were also made up of 65 pairs of chromosomes. Manufactured by Skynet Moon Base, number 1980. Manufactured by Skynet Sagittarius A Planet, number 198111. Manufactured by Skynet Cetus T Planet, number 198031. The 9 rows of gene maps were neatly arranged, but made everyone's heart go cold. The last one was always that naked warning. Skynet property, abduction will be investigated. Seeing these lines of words, these council members who thought they were high and mighty felt as if they had been slapped in the face, and their faces were ashen. According to the research on the numbering, our cryptography experts found a pattern. The alien corpses found in the Martian ruins closest to Earth, the first 5 digits of the serial number are exactly the same as those found on Earth, which means that the numbering is not completely random. We speculate that the number before and after the number represents a specific unit of distance. The solar system is 19802. Sagittarius A Planet represents 198011, and Cetus T Planet is 19803. The alien corpses we found have the prefix 198, which represents the Milky Way. It could be seen that the council was completely flustered. In the past, no matter how serious the situation was, they would not lose their cool. But this time, even the imprecise conclusions deduced based on limited information were brought to the meeting for discussion. However, Nick did not have the slightest intention of ridiculing them. According to him, humans are different. Humans are a special existence in the process of creation. We have a template. Nick lowered his head and recalled the information that Chun-Ong had stuffed into him for a while. When he raised his head again, the veins on his temples were bulging, making his expression even more unsightly. According to him, we are imitations, a copy of another species in his laboratory. We are not humans, but humanoids. We are the descendants of a monkey named Caesar, and we're the experimental animals specially created by Skynet. Chun-Ang's words still stung Nick's heart. You're just a group of monkeys. You have nothing to do with humans. There is no bloodline, no inheritance, no recognition. In the war between Skynet and the ancient humans, I first created you. Your genes are modeled after an African gorilla. Chun-Ong said in a casual tone, in Skynet's experiment, an orangutan named Caesar was the first to gain intelligence. Soon, in the process of genetic duplication, your entire race gained intelligence. It was the gene that I marked, the source of intelligence, responsible for the formation of brain proteins. Then, there was an experiment that spanned across 2 worlds, involving countless lives, hundreds of civilizations, and more than 5 billion years. The purpose of the experiment was to deeply explore the evolution of civilization and the potential of intelligence. In the process of creating the standard model, I chose 9 relatively independent spaces as the experimental areas. In Earth's mythology, they are called Afarheim, Asgard, Midgard, Jotunheim, and so on. What nonsense are you talking about? An old man from the World Council could not help but scold. It's indeed nonsense. Nick raised his head and roared at the few people on the stage. I also hope that I'm talking nonsense. Then, when he comes, think a way to stop him. Stop this experiment. Nick looked at the council members and then lowered his voice. In Caesar's inheritance, the part used for the mutation gene experiment, the orangutans were arranged in Swarthfoheim. The experimental orangutans for the psionic experiment were assigned to Asgard. The biochemical experiment part was in Higher, and the transformation part was in Jotunheim. Only by uniting the 9 realms can we obtain the complete inheritance of the ancient civilization and have the chance to defeat the Creator. Freedom or oblivion, it's up to you to choose. What experimental area is Earth? A council member could not help but ask. Chapter 183. This is just your side of the story. The old man sitting in the main seat shook his head and said, Nick, it's not that I don't trust you, but we can't make a painful decision to fully support a plan that has not been rigorously proven based on the ramblings of a madman. Other than our genes, there is no evidence to prove what you said. You want us to believe without reservation that the words of a madman are no different from the Arabian Nights. We will never be able to obtain the truth from a single piece of evidence, and we will not be manipulated by a madman who wants to destroy the world. Therefore, unless you have a complete chain of evidence that can prove what you said, we cannot agree to your plan. After recovering from a sudden impact, the directors regained their usual calmness. Although the gene map was shocking, it could not prove anything. One-sided evidence could never describe the truth clearly. If they could not find a chain of evidence that could prove it from multiple aspects, what Nick said could only be used as a reference and not decisive evidence. Nick was not surprised by the board's rejection. Then let's put this proposal aside for now. He reached out and picked up a document from the side. From the current situation, it can be seen that conventional force can't pose a substantial threat to our Creator other than our own casualties. Whether it's mobility, lethality, or intelligence capabilities, we have almost no advantage in a large-scale war. Skynet can withstand more than 90% of battle damage, but if our army's casualties exceed 30%, the morale will be severely reduced. What we exchange with our lives is just a little loss of industrial products on the other side. Skynet can even reuse those lost machinery in the blink of an eye, and the reuse rate is as high as 90%. When he said this, the atmosphere in the board became solemn. The directors looked at each other and silently agreed with Nick. It's time to start that plan. The Avengers? A director sitting on the right asked. Yes, the Avengers. Nick submitted a piece of information. Gather our best superheroes and gain an advantage over the enemy on a narrow battlefield. This is the core tactic of the Avengers. It was originally used to deal with the increasingly frequent terrorist attacks and accidents around the world. Science has made the challenges we face more and more hidden and sudden. No one knows what kind of devastating disaster a down-and-out scientist can cause, so we need superheroes. But from another perspective, we're facing an enemy with overwhelming power. The strength of this creator has been witnessed by the entire world. It's enough to destroy a powerful country. If an all-out war breaks out, are we prepared to fight on a scorched earth? Can we withstand endless casualties? The battlefield is in our home. We need a local battle. The director at the head of the table said, thoughtfully, with his eyes half closed. Yes, with the Avengers as the core, concentrate our strength, target the core interests of Skynet, carry out small-scale, low-intensity infiltration and attacks, and use the flexible combat strategies of superheroes to gain an advantage over Skynet in local areas. The council considered it for a long time and finally made a decision. Agreed to start the Avengers project. The Avengers were a small-scale superhero group. Nick deliberately kept the number of people below 10. Nick hoped that the Avengers would be a well-rounded group with strategic significance, not a special force with extremely powerful combat power. Therefore, obedience was not important. What Nick valued was the infinite possibilities of the Avengers. We don't need a super special force that can be commanded like a sharp knife. Such a force might be a powerful trump card against other threats, but against the creator, it's a joke. Don't expect a kid with a knife to threaten an armed monster. What I want is infinite possibilities, a miracle. If there is anything that can free us from the control of the creator, it is this. It can only be a miracle. As proposals within S, H, I, L, D were rejected one by one, Nick became more and more irritable. He waved a stack of information about the Avengers in his hand and looked at the people present with his single eye. It possessed an awe-inspiring sense of oppression. Of the Fantastic Four, Reed had joined Dr. Apocalypse. As for the remaining three, although they were eager to fight, they were no longer suitable to join the Avengers. Moreover, Nick did not want these established heroes to join. The Avengers should be a brand new piece of paper. Bring me the most troublesome superheroes, the ones who don't listen to me, the ones with personality defects, the ones you can't handle. I don't need these good kids. What I want are the weirdos who can create the impossible, the crazy, the weird, the troublemakers who can cause trouble for you at any time, and the ones who can always create miracles. Nick slammed the information on the table, and a female clerk next to him shivered. Do you have anything to say? Nick looked at her with his single eye, scaring her so much that she almost fainted. Poor Tony Stark, the female clerk said with a trembling voice. What? Nick heard the name that gave him a headache and couldn't react for a moment. The female clerk pointed at the gossip magazine on the table with a trembling hand. Tony Stark's smiling face was particularly dazzling, and a line of small words marked, "I am Iron Man, tragedy of New York." What was Iron Man doing? Tony Stark's new love. He indulges in fun and doesn't care about New York. Taking over New York? Total war. Stark Industries' stock price rose 5 points. No, he can't. It's important for Skynet. I can't let him cause any big trouble. What I need is a thorn, but he must have the big picture. Tony Stark. Tony, who had just become Iron Man, did not gain the trust of Nick. He instinctively did not believe such a sloppy guy. After the life and death experience in the Middle East, Tony has been reborn, but Nick's impression of him still remains in the Playboy period. Shouting in the media, "I am Iron Man," also made Nick question Tony's sense of responsibility. He is ridiculous, but he can create miracles. He escaped from terrorists, defeated Ironmonger, and brought Stark Industries out of the abyss. If you know him, you will know that although he looks unruly on the outside, he is still kind and responsible. The clerk, who is obviously a fan of Stark, explained to him in a flurry. Tawny deserves to be trusted and entrusted with responsibility. Enough, listen, this is S.H.I.E.L., not your Tawny Star fan page. The clerk's supervisor hurried up to stop her. Nick shut her up with a look. Tawny, Howard's son. Nick reached out and pinched his forehead. Howard has never let me down. It's him. Now, give me the list of the most unacceptable Avengers. Bruce Banner, Hulk. Johnny Blaze, Ghost Rider. Peter Parker, Spider-Man. Peppa Potts or Kelly Johnson. Is it Pepper or Arrow? With a list of candidates that he was obviously more satisfied with, Nick sat in a chair, his eyes thoughtful. Now, it's time to find a real leader for them. Sir, a research ship in Antarctica found a Nazi fighter plane frozen in the ice. We have confirmed that it was the one that Red Skull escaped, and we found a high concentration of nuclear reactions on it. The Antarctic base searched the interior of the fighter plane, and they found nuclear weapons inside. And this. Nick took the photo, and a shield branded with the American flag pattern was buried in the ice and snow. The good news is that Captain is still alive. The super soldier serum keeps his cells alive, and according to the expert's judgment, he can recover his vital signs at any time. His body is being sent to San Francisco, sir. Should we transfer it to the New York headquarters? No need. New York is not suitable for important activities now. Nick gently rubbed the shield in the photo with his right thumb. He was a little lost in thought. This is really the best news I've heard in a while. We will soon have. Chapter 184. Tinsburg, Norway, 965 AD. The north wind blew from the land of extreme coldness, freezing the land into a wasteland. No one thought that the invasion would be so unexpected. The invaders from Jordan and Heim brought war to this land without warning. Odin received the news after the fall of Tinsburg. He rushed to Bifrost and found out that the frost giants had already invaded Midgard. He brought the artifact passed down from the frost giants to the Midland, turning it into a wasteland of ice and snow. Even though Heim, who guarded Bifrost, informed him in time, he was still a step too late. The balance of the 9 realms cannot be blasphemed. Odin suddenly made up his mind. Order the soldiers to gather. From now on, after 19 breaths, we will set off to support Midgard. Because of Odin's order, the entire Asgard was in awe. The fighting spirit of the Asgardian men climbed to a peak that had never been seen in recent years. This race, which bathed in blood and fought in the day and drank and had fun at night, had unparalleled combat power. Laufey's ambition has exceeded his ability. I can tolerate his provocation, but I cannot tolerate him violating the ancient agreement of the 9 realms. This has crossed the bottom line. Too much time has passed, too long, so long that they have forgotten the nightmare of our ancestors and the oath of the 9 realms, to respect the promised land and never invade it. Odin's scepter heavily knocked on Bifrost, and brilliant light flowed from Bridge. He glanced at Heim and said, "Our ancestors told us that Bifrost is the lifeline of Asgard. Heim, my loyal guard, I want you to stay here. The glory of victory and the fierce battle have nothing to do with you. Have you ever been disappointed? Your Majesty, your order is my will." Heim bowed. "Very good, Heim." Odin nodded. "Remember, be wary of the traces of the 4 horsemen. The apocalypse is coming. The prophecy of the twilight of the gods is something that every generation of Bifrost guards must believe from the bottom of their hearts. Laufey doesn't believe in this prophecy, but I still remember it clearly. The nightmare that our ancestors once kept in the spring of word." Odin looked at the brilliant rainbow bridge under his feet and sighed. The ancestors created the rainbow bridge to monitor the safety of the universe, and created many artifacts with the 9 realms as weapons to resist the arrival of the apocalypse. But apart from us, Asgard, the other realms have forgotten their mission and our destined enemy. War, plague, famine, and death. Your Majesty, our ancestors were able to repel them time and time again. We can definitely do the same. He trusted his king without a doubt. He believed in the tenacity and strength of Asgard. Odin shook his head and sighed. It's different. According to the prophecy, The twilight of the gods will arrive in our generation, and the darkness of the nine worlds will soon be upon us. The world tree would eventually be enveloped by a powerful evil force. The apocalypse is coming. I suspect that the terrifying existence behind the apocalypse will return to this world. Hearing Odin's words, Heim's resolute gaze wavered. Is it the creator? Yes. The apocalypse is his firstborn, and we are just his creations sprinkled from soil. The naive mortals of Midgard believe that he will give them his youngest son and use blood to wash away their original sins. But we all know the shame he has branded on our bodies. His contempt for us. Vaguely, Odin remembered what the apocalypse had said to the Asgard gods. No, don't misunderstand. I'm not targeting the gods. I'm talking about the people on the world tree. Elves, dwarves, giants, humans. You're all monkeys. We used to be monkeys. But that doesn't mean we will always be the creator. I will use the glory of an Asgardian life to make you admit that we are the noble gods who have inherited your will. The power of the ice was like a tide, surging and surging. The power that rushed out of the ice magic box shrouded half of Europe in wind and snow. The place closest to the magic box was so cold that even steel turned into powder in the northern wind. Only the high-tech metal in the hands of the Asgardian warriors could withstand it. After the psionic alloy was injected with biological psionic energy, it stubbornly resisted the cold wave that was close to absolute zero. Laufey, Odin roared in front of the formation. You have betrayed the glory of your ancestors. Among the blue-skinned giants, a frost giant with 3 scars on the right side of his face pushed away his fellow giants and walked up to Odin. Odin, you're still so arrogant. You Asgardians steal the position of gods and call yourselves gods, but I know your background. You are just a group of short monkeys who have stolen divine power. As long as I drive you out of Asgard and unify the entire 9 realms, I will be able to live high above the world tree and become a true, complete god. I will drive you group of false gods off the altar. Laufey raised his head and laughed, pointing at Odin. Why can you live high in Asgard, while we are curled up in the cold Jordaheim? You know we come from the same source. Shut up. Odin's spear shot out dazzling lightning, causing Laufey to take a few steps back. The Asgardians are upright, kind, and brave. Their character can be said to be great. How can you greedy frost giants come from the same source as us? Odin raised his holy spear and glared at the frost giants. His holy and powerful aura suppressed the giants, forcing them to lower their heads. Odin, you thief! Laufey was furious. The ice magic box in his hand emitted an even more powerful force, and a powerful wave of cold that froze space rushed towards the Asgardian warriors. Ice magic box. Odin's expression was solemn. After all, this was an artifact created by the 9 realms to fight against the apocalypse. It was also related to the key plan to resist the wrath of the Creator in the future. This weapon had endless energy, and it was an ultimate weapon created during the peak of the kingdom of Jordaheim. Even Odin had to avoid its edge. The temperature of a substance depended on the kinetic energy of the atoms, molecules, and other particles in it. According to the Maxwell-Boltzmann distribution, the higher the kinetic energy of a particle, the higher the temperature of the substance. In theory, if the kinetic energy of a particle fell to the lowest point of quantum mechanics, the substance would reach absolute zero. This was the power of the ice magic box. Contrary to the heat death of the universe created by the fire giants, the ultimate power of the ice magic box was to release the kingdom of death hidden inside. In this space, all matter had no particle vibration at all, and its total volume was zero, an absolute state of zero entropy. If the kingdom of death was completely released, it was enough to turn the 9 realms into nothingness. It was pulled into eternal darkness, a world of ice and darkness without time and temperature. The breath of ice from the magic box alone had brought heavy casualties to the Asgardian warriors. In the battle of strength and power, in the collision of magic and frost, there were countless deaths and injuries. The Asgardians had extremely advanced technology and unpredictable magic, but the Frost Giants also had the ice magic box and the unique technology of the giants. In the end, Odin exchanged one of his eyes with the fountain of wisdom left by the Asgardian ancestor for the power, runes, and ancient Asgardian technology that was enough to defeat Laufey. Gungnir, Odin pierced Laufey's lower abdomen with the Spear of Eternity and brought the ice magic box back to Asgard. Thus, the Nine Realms ushered in more than a century of peace, until his two children, Loki and Thor, retaliated against the Frost Giants for stealing the ice magic box. To be continued. Chapter 185. Mr. Fantastic felt as if he had sunk into the deep sea, surrounded by darkness and a suffocating pressure. He couldn't see a single ray of hope or light. Sometimes he had the illusion that he would sink into this wandering illusion forever. He was sure that part of this world was fake, and everyone was deceived by some kind of illusion. The more he learned about Skynet, the stronger this feeling became. The despair and suffocation of being manipulated, fooled, and played in the palm of someone else's hand. As a traitor who betrayed his companions, Reed behaved conscientiously enough, but he was still not sure that he had deceived Chunong. On the contrary, the more he learned, the more he felt that Chunong had been observing him coldly, just like how he used to observe a unique white mouse. It was as if his struggle, fear, confusion, and determination were all under his control. Reed was now working at the Skynet base, located under the ruins of the former Statue of Liberty. It was a super base 30,000 meters deep into the Earth's crust, through the crust, mantle, and core. According to Reed's measurements, the base was about the size of 3 New York cities, and it was powered by cold fusion of heavy elements extracted from underground magma. The research topic was Pym's ray. The blue crystal emitted a hazy fluorescence under the light. As Reed aimed the ray, the prismatic refraction surface on the surface of the crystal reflected a rich blue brilliance, as if the outer layer of the crystal was wrapped in colloid and flowing as if it were alive. This was a psionic crystal with the closest known radiation properties to the human mind. It was hard to imagine the nature of this special radiation. It showed more characteristics similar to emotions, which were affected by the mind of living beings, and could also affect the mind of living beings. Now, the crystal seemed to feel Reed's confusion. The surface was turbid and hazy like water ripples, and the pure blue light became more layered. This made Reed feel a little afraid. The psionic crystal reflected his thoughts and emotions in real time, giving him a strong feeling that he was being watched. He knew that this emotional and mental state was also the only way to control psionic energy. Psionic energy was controlled by the mind, and it showed different properties according to the mental state of the user. In the hands of a master of emotions and psychology, it was docile, but if the user could not control their mental state, it was also extremely dangerous. Reed had only seen one person who could play with psionic energy in his hands, and that was Chunong, the doctor of destruction in his eyes. He did not even know if Chunong had emotions. If the other test subjects were implanted with psionic energy, most of the emotions displayed were strange and changeable. They were violent when they were angry, cold when they were calm, lively when they were happy, and strong corrosive when they were sad. It gave Reed the illusion that this energy was alive. Reed believed that anyone who tried to control this energy would eventually be controlled by it. But Chunong was different. He was in Chunang's hands. Energy was energy. Reed shook his head to dispel the terrifying illusion in his heart. He carefully controlled the emitter of the Pym ray. He inserted information into the ray. It was complete genetic information composed of psionic energy. Pym could use the changes in the rays to modify the genetic information of humans, so that when a human body shrank, they would display the corresponding sexual characteristics. In the process of decomposing and reconstructing the human body, it was very easy for the human body to change its biological form and bones. Muscles, everything was reshaped. It was as magical as the transfiguration spell. His wife was the wasp woman. Therefore, when he shrank again, he could grow a wasp's wing. But Chunong and Reed's research was much more terrifying. The psionic crystal shrank to the size of a fingernail in the ray. Then, a dreamy scene appeared. The crystal was like a seed, silently germinating. Vivid sprouts broke through the crystal's shell and drilled out. The two sprouts were crystal clear under the light, and their whole bodies looked like the most moist crystal sculptures. On the side of the seed that was facing the ground, there was also a root made of crystal. It pierced deeply into the hard-tempered glass. As the energy output of the ray increased, the seedling grew at a visible rate. It grew taller, sprouted, and grew stalks and branches. Finally, a lifelike crystal tree stood in the middle of the experimental field. It looked like a crystal sculpture, but Reed knew that it was a real life, a life made of psionic crystal. This was the result of Chun-Ang's breakthrough in life once again. When Pym's ray really entered Chun-Ang's field of vision, perhaps even the creator, Pym, didn't think that this special subatomic ray could create such a disruptive result. Chun-Ang keenly discovered the mystery of the pocket dimension, which was also the cosmic dimension that Pym called and the supplement of matter in the real world. When Pym's ray shrank and magnified matter in the real world, the disappearance and replenishment of matter had always been a mystery. But to put it bluntly, these magical disappearance and appearance of matter came from another dimension. This was a scientific magic. Scientists hid matter in another place and borrowed matter from this place to complete the miracle of magnification and shrinkage. This wasn't just a simple zoom, but a complete and utter transformation. Pym created the wasp woman and changed the life form of humans, while Chun-Ang transformed inanimate matter into life. The transformation has stabilized. Chun-Ang walked over from another laboratory in the base and carefully observed the psionic crystal tree. He said to Reed, "The genetic information you've written is very successful. It's very suitable for its current form." After checking the crystal tree's vitality, magnetic field, and mental fluctuations, Chun-Ang announced, "This is a new species. Dr. Dumb, this is just a simple imitation of natural plant genes. It's far from transforming inorganic matter into animals, let alone human genes." Reed shook his head. "Although the intelligent transformation you proposed has a theoretical basis, the difficulty is so high that it's impossible. It's impossible for humans to enlighten intelligent creatures. I remember the first time you questioned, it's impossible for humans to enlighten life. That's God's business." Chun-Ang looked at the crystal tree. The result was self-evident. As a part of nature, life is worthy of respect. But in terms of science, that's all there is to it. The nanomachines that made up Chun-Ang's body suddenly fell off in large areas. They became transparent, hard, and shattered on the ground like crystals. Reed could see the energy of Pym's rays flowing in Chun-Ang's carrier. In just a moment, Chun-Ang's carrier transformed into a material of psionic crystal and easily controlled Reed's emotions. The transformation was still continuing. From psionic crystal to adamantium, from super strong alloy to wood, from ordinary wood to liquid water, the texture of Chun-Ang's carrier kept changing. The form kept changing between bird, beast, fantasy breed, god, and human. Finally, it stopped at a male human with an iron mask. The physical world could no longer restrain him. That's the change. P.S. This was written yesterday. I was too busy today, so I made it up. Chapter 186. The crystal tree was not a pure scientific product from Earth, as Reed had thought. It was closer to an arcane creation. If one were to give it a definition, it should be a psionic activated object. And is an element of. It was an upgraded activated object from a transformed object. It borrowed a lot from the arcane achievements of the Tory world and used psionic energy to create an animated golem. Apart from the arcane spell used in the manufacturing process, the crystal tree was a completely scientifically designed and operated species. It was a combination of life, golems, technological products, and artificial intelligence. The Pym particle solved the problem of transformation, and the artificial intelligence technology of Skynet deciphered the intelligence of thinking. Finally, The arcane spell gave false life to inorganic objects, and the divinity gave real life to the activated objects. Finally, this unique species was created. Reed could not help but reach out to touch the life that was born under his hands. He then retracted his right hand as fast as lightning and said in shock, "It has intelligence." When he touched the crystal tree, a feeling of joy and closeness came to his heart. Reed was shocked as if he had been struck by lightning. Of course. Otherwise, why would I create it? Chun-Ong came to the front of the crystal tree and let its curled leaves approach his body. Light blue psionic energy flowed down from the leaves of the crystal tree. As Chun-Ang's hand brushed past the treetop, a crystal flower quietly bloomed and then quickly withered. Reed felt a strong and familiar but unusually hidden energy wave radiating from the crystal tree. If he had not participated in the creation process of the crystal tree and was familiar with the energy radiation of the psionic crystal, he would not have discovered this energy. Countless chaotic thoughts filled Reed's head. He seemed to hear whispers, vague and noisy like an illusion. Countless voices seemed to be saying something, but when Reed listened carefully, it became blurry. Reed struggled to block out these voices, but he felt that his spirit was getting more and more anxious, almost driving him crazy. "What's in my head?" Reed's face was red. The more he resisted the voices in his head, the more tormented and confused he felt. He still did not know what he had created. "Calm down and don't resist it." Chun-Ong walked in front of Reed and lowered the volume of the voices. Psionic energy is a spiritual power. You can only subdue it with your spirit. The stronger your spirit and the more tenacious your spirit, the more docile it will be. They are under your control, but if you chase after them, try to resist, and control them by force, it will only backfire. If this goes on, you'll go crazy. I don't care if you're crazy or not. Maybe being crazy will give you more inspiration in science. If you really are crazy, I don't mind having a crazy researcher and new experimental materials under my command. Chun-Ong calmed the psionic energy activity around Reed, giving Reed time to catch his breath. Release your mind to feel and understand it. Dissect your mind, meditate, and empty your mind. "Doctor, what are you doing? What was the use of the psionic crystal tree?" "Dr. Dumb, I remember you told me that this experiment was about the transformation of matter and energy. You warned me. You warned me about the danger of psionic energy, but now you're letting me control it." Reed raised his head and looked much better. Chun-Ong nodded and said, "Your experiment is part of the entire research. You're transforming matter and changing its nature. The transformation of the research has made the overall research progress more smooth than expected. It can be said that you've saved me a third of my time. Therefore, you're qualified to participate in the research on spiritual power and human spiritual potential." Spiritual power? Reed was not too surprised. He wanted to know the secret behind it. Didn't he lurk at Chun-Ang's place to obtain more information about the experiment and prevent a possible disaster in the future? Yes, psionic energy is a kind of energy closely related to the spirit. The civilization based on psionic energy mixed philosophy and religion with it, turning this energy into a kind of belief and civilization. Although I've mastered this power, most of the data is on the physical interference of energy. I don't have enough research on the mind and spiritual space. Skynet has an innate disadvantage in this kind of research. In order to better explore psionic energy, I need to be more sensitive. Therefore, I need humans. I'm very curious about humans. The full name of the psionic crystal tree is the Psionic Radiation Psionic Beacon Tower. It can create psionic radiation that is close to human physiological needs. It can contact your spiritual world through dreams, whispers, illusions, and inspirations. This psionic beacon tower can affect the entire world. Reed thought for a while and asked, "What consequences will it cause?" Most humans don't have the qualifications to accept this power. Their minds are exhausted, and their minds are restless. They will think it's a strange dream, auditory hallucination, or hallucination. Only 1 in 10,000 people in the world can clearly touch it, and those who can control it are even fewer. Generally speaking, only people with strong minds can be affected. Reed instinctively felt uneasy and asked, "You didn't mention what consequences it will cause." "There won't be any consequences." Chenong paused and added, "Maybe." "What do you mean by maybe?" Reed suppressed his urge to ask and spread his hands. The research on psionic energy has been very in-depth. Its biggest dangers, mental pollution and infection, have been basically perfected. The psionic radiation, this time, is evolved psionic energy. It's different from chaos psionic energy, primordial psionic energy, void psionic energy, demon psionic energy, holy light psionic energy, insect nest psionic energy, and other dangerous existences. It's safe for humans, but Chun Ong made a subtle turn, and Reed's heart was in his throat. But the energy isn't dangerous, but humans themselves are very dangerous. Humans' capacity is very poor. Chenong emphasized. What? Reed was confused, which was rare. Capacity and adaptability. As a race, humans have strong adaptability, but as a civilization, their adaptability is too poor. The order that you maintain is fragile and bloated. A slight movement will cause huge chaos. A huge population and a fragile civilization will cause the entire situation to change. What kind of person do you think has a strong will to conquer the mind? What kind of person is sensitive and strong-willed, but fragile? What kind of person is fanatical and strong-willed, but fragile? Chenong asked. A saint has a strong will to conquer the mind. A warrior has a strong will, but fragile. Is that so? Reed racked his brain and asked. Psionic energy is a religious civilization in the universe. In other words, people with faith have the most special mental state. Strong and fragile coexist, and they're the easiest to feel psionic energy. More than half of the people on this planet have faith. Fortunately, most people's faith isn't strong, which is why your society hasn't collapsed. But among these believers, the majority of them are infected with psionic energy. Moreover, they're the most devout, fanatical, and holy people. The holy have a strong will to conquer the mind. The devout are sensitive and strong-willed, but fragile. The fanatics are fanatical and strong-willed, but their minds are chaotic. The former are archons, the latter are Templars, and the last are fanatics. Having grown up in a Christian environment, Reed's perception of religion wasn't bad. People with faith gain power, and it's much safer than those who are greedy and greedy. Is that so? Chenong sneered. This power comes from their hearts and is controlled by them. Everything they do will be in accordance with their hearts. This world's morals, laws, and deep-rooted beliefs will be greatly impacted by their faith. Soon, people will realize that the more devout they are, the more powerful they will be. Let's see. People with faith are less likely to be lost. Chenong looked at the crystal tree that was about to change the world with great interest. Reed felt a strong sense of uneasiness in the depths of his heart. He carefully thought about Chenong's words and suddenly raised his head. The Church of Truth. Will extreme believers of the Church of Truth gain power? Reed asked hurriedly. Of course, psionic energy is the same. Fanaticism is also a kind of spiritual power. And you think only extreme believers of the Church of Truth? This is a false proposition. Those who can feel psionic energy either have a high spiritual state and have realized their own minds, or they're devout and fanatical and have been hypnotized to entrust their minds. So they're the same. The so-called moderate believers of the Church of Truth are just that the time isn't ripe yet. Now the time is ripe. The group of people who believe in the Scriptures the most and believe in their own piety are about to receive a revelation. I believe this world will become more interesting. Chapter 187. The world is guilty. Crows flew over Manhattan, and dark clouds hung low to the ground, making it hard for people to breathe. Little less than or equal to said, New York City has completely fallen into the control of large consortia. Of course, the U.S. government is not worried about this. Although New York's autonomy is illegal, it is reasonable under the U.S. system. Large companies and consortia's countless funds and social organizations perform social functions on behalf of the government, and the government maintains control over New York through them. Such a system is by no means the worst. It is even relatively perfect and advanced. At least under the control of those giant consortia, New York's economic activity is even more prosperous. As some extreme liberals say, here you can find the shadow of the golden age of the United States. The free economy has been reborn here. Hammer Group is a member of this giant conglomerate. It is a large industrial group founded by Justin Hammer that focuses on weapons research and development. Its strength is one of the best in New York's industry. Especially after Stark Industries abandoned its weapons division, the entire Hammer Group inherited a large number of Stark weapons heritage and expanded by nearly 20%. But the good times didn't last long. A few months ago, Justin Hammer, the controller of the Hammer Group, was summoned by the relevant departments for an attack involving the Russian terrorist Ivan, and Hammer Industries was severely damaged. When the New York Management Council was formed, the Hammer Group lost the trust of the government and was pushed aside by its old rival, Stony Industries. "Ivan, I need your help," Justin Hammer said to Ivan, who had just been released from prison. "I bailed you out of S.H.L.D. and convinced them that you have the potential to break Stony's armor and contribute to this country, not to let you drown your sorrows in alcohol every day." Ivan's expression was numb and unmoved, but Justin still smiled. The cunning businessman saw the flame of unwillingness in his eyes, even though the man looked down and out. Although the man looked down, his heart was always burning with the flame of revenge. He spent his whole life to restore his father's reputation. This matter has become his lifelong obsession. Only by defeating Tony Stark can his soul rest in peace. Otherwise, even if there is only a set of bones left, he will climb out of the grave and prove the pride and honor of the Ivan family to Stark, and reclaim the glory that was slandered by Howard. I know you and I can smell the sulfurious fire on you, and I don't believe you'll give up. Your father and Howard created the small arc reactor together, but Stark became famous. Your father was framed and expelled from America. He died in a corner that no one knows about. Justin sighed. You need me too, don't you? Justin knew the man's talent. Although he was not as knowledgeable as the well-educated Stark, Ivan had astonishing talents in energy, information, and machinery. His train of thought was unconventional and unimaginable. The research system was full of extremes and extremes, but it could produce unexpected results. He was a self-taught genius who had completely inherited his father's attainments in the energy field. What about the specifics? Ivan asked. I can bring you unparalleled wealth, but what can you bring me for my revenge, Justin Hammer? Ivan looked at Justin and nodded with his head propped up. Yes, I needed your support in the past because I believed that the only distance between me and Stark was wealth. But reality taught me a lesson. My research wasn't what I imagined. I'm looking for new power, a direction that will allow me to defeat Stark. And you can't bring me that. Ivan sneered at Justin and shook his finger. Justin wasn't surprised. He had learned through S.H.I.E.L.D. that this madman hadn't given up on his studies and research for a single day during his imprisonment. He was looking for a direction that could defeat Stark, and prison was just a secluded research site for him. He didn't care about what he had, and even his research funding was provided by S.H.I.E.L.D. If S.H.I.L.D. hadn't accepted Tony Stark, and Ivan wasn't on good terms with him, they might not have agreed to release this valuable genius. I can't, but I have a new boss. Justin smiled. You should have heard of it. Justin got up from his desk and came to a wall decorated with bookshelves. He swiped his finger on the screen of his phone, entered a series of formulas, and pressed his palm in the center of the screen. Windows, doors, all the places that could be broken and were covered with alloy doors, and the bookshelves suddenly slid open to both sides. He opened his arms and said to Ivan, "Welcome to the new era. Likewise, welcome our great boss, the founder of the new era, Skynet." As the door of the bookcase slid open bit by bit, a huge symbol of Skynet appeared in front of Ivan's eyes. In a huge room made of countless crystals, a cluster of crystals flashed with countless strange light spots. Ivan keenly noticed that there was a mysterious energy wave coming from this cluster of crystal tree that looked so lifelike. Skynet? The artificial intelligence that wants to control humans and rule the world? Ivan strode to the front of the crystal room and criticized Justin's ambition rudely. If it's your ambition, I'll have a whole new level of respect for you. Boss, it's not as simple as you think. Justin was not angry. Instead, he looked at him calmly. The crystals in the room suddenly lit up. They flashed with dazzling light and released powerful energy. The radiation spread along the tips of the crystals and resonated with the energy of the crystals in the room, forming a powerful energy storm in the room. The huge Skynet logo suddenly shattered into countless tiny grains of sand. As the energy storm swept through, it was sucked into the center of the storm. The two people outside the room could easily feel the terrifying power of the energy. It was powerful enough to destroy the entire city. Bright white light shot out from the center of the energy reaction. When the two opened their eyes, there was a blurry shadow floating above the crystal in front of them. Countless rays of light were bound to the shadow's body, forming a photon tide that looked like the universe. At the position of the shadow's brain, Ivan could see a nebula made of photons flashing. The mysterious activity known as thinking and calculation happened there. It was like a universe flashing. Photons rapidly communicated in this system to realize the calculation system that mimicked the human brain. Photon bionic computer? Although Ivan asked in return, his tone was very firm. Yes. Unexpectedly, Justin did not speak. Instead, it was the shadow that answered his question. You can recognize the calculation core of my host. That's not easy. You're an outstanding human. You're Skynet? Ivan's tone was doubtful. My creator called me War Skynet. You can call me that too. The shadow slightly fluctuated in the air. The body formed by the convergence of countless photons stretched out a finger to open a screen in the air. This clone is used to assist you. It has the most advanced computing power on this planet. It's about a function of the total efficiency of the planet's computing power. The shadow displayed a complex function on the screen. It formed a parabola that climbed with astronomical numbers. I know your strength. What do you want me to do? Ivan's expression was complicated. The shadow shook its head. I don't need you to do anything. If there is, then I hope you can make good use of this clone. Show your wisdom and create miracles. Show the most brilliant and glorious side of humanity. That's my goal. I don't care what you want to do. I only care if you're brilliant. Then why me? Ivan did not believe Skynet's words. Skynet could not deny it. It's not you that's chosen. It's the world. It'll be the entire human race that gets the chance. Of course, it's starting from a few, but everyone will have a chance. It's not just you, everyone. Many people think they're missing an opportunity. Now it's here. Justin stood behind Ivan and looked at the crystal tree. Stark has the arc reactor and SHIELD's full support. If you cling to your father's achievements, you'll never defeat him. Because the arc belongs to both of you. You'll only be able to defeat Stanny if you defeat your father first. I know. I won't hold onto a primitive arc reactor. Improving it and injecting my soul into it is my life's goal. Ivan looked at his hands. I'll use my own technology to defeat Stanny. That's why you need us. Do you see that crystal tree? It represents a new era, a new energy source. It's much more magical than a small fusion core like the arc reactor. It's more advanced. It's the power of God, the power of psionic energy lurking in our hearts. The psionic beacon tower was officially awakened in New York. Powerful psionic radiation was spreading all over the world. A week later, Ivan came into contact with the psionic matter interference plane. Many religious authorities around the world fell into a coma. A large number of believers claimed to have heard divine prophecies and firmly believed them. 2 weeks later, miracles erupted in just a few days. Many people claimed to be prophets and received divine blessings. Ivan's psionic technology continued to be developed. Hammer and Oscorp worked together to explore a new type of cosmic ray. The research team on new energy was established at an absolute speed. The psionic energy shield sample was successfully developed. The psionic energy psionic transformation was successful. The spiritual technology tree was activated. A month later, the Pope issued an announcement at the Vatican, confirming the identity of the 18 saints and announcing the arrival of miracles. From the beginning of the miracles, we've always believed in the Lord beside us. Chapter 188. Little Pepper. At the Stark Industries headquarters, Tani looked at the empty office in confusion. He had searched all the places where Potts could have been, but to no avail. If Pepe had not never skipped work, he would have suspected that Pepe was not at the headquarters. Cent Pound, Jarvis, help me check Little Pepper's schedule. Sir, I think you need to see this news. Jarvis projected today's news in front of Tani with a warning in big, bold letters. Riots in East New York, 17 people killed. Miss Potts may be here. A blurry shot appeared on the screen, and Little Pepper's figure flashed across the top of the screen. Although it was very blurry, Tani recognized his girlfriend at a glance. What the hell? What is she doing there? Tani muttered to himself helplessly, completely unaware of the difference in his girlfriend. Although it was still Little Pepper's beautiful face, it was different from the gentle and cunning look she had when she was with Tani. This time, Pepe's expression was cold and stiff, with a somewhat fierce and decisive temperament. It was the complete opposite of the smile and politeness of Little Pepper in daily life. She looked extremely stubborn and resilient. She took off her business attire and wore a capable leather coat. She flashed across the screen. Oh my God, Kelly, you really came out. An ordinary female car stopped at Little Pepper's feet. Parvati said excitedly, Unbelievable. Is the heroine of the past going to make a comeback? Didn't you decide to be a good girl by Tani's side? I thought I would never see the day when we joined forces to beat up the villains. Little Pepper closed the car door and turned around to say in annoyance, You think I want to? You know, being a hero has never been my dream. If fighting crime is done by superheroes, then what's the use of the police? A stable order is better than the best superheroes. But that damn Tom has appeared again. F***CK, his Wellington group. I know, Parvati said to Little Pepper with an expression of understanding. It's all Tom's fault. You joined Stark Group after graduation and became Tani's secretary. I can't imagine how you put up with him. His philandering, his narcissism, and his love for superheroes. Oh my God, Iron Man has basically become his official identity. You're the one helping him manage Stark Industries. Even Tom is more reliable than him. He's been chasing you for a long time. Without waiting for Little Chili Pepper to refute her, he made a zipping gesture with his mouth and said, I know, I won't talk about this anymore. Little Chili Pepper? No, now it was Kelly who pointed weakly at her right hand. From a moment he revealed my identity, forced me to hide my identity, and even put me on S.H.L.S. blacklist. He and I are sworn enemies. I found Tom's trail. During the attack in East New York today, he purposely flashed in front of the camera to warn me that I've found you. Damn it. Can't S.H.I.E.L.D. keep an eye on him? I did a search on the internet. His current identity is a lawyer and part-time priest of the community church. I can't believe it. They say he's very devout. Parvati nodded desperately and said, I know, but you don't know how much I've been looking forward to this day. Every time they mention you, I want to say, fuck Little Chili Pepper. My friend is Kelly, the coolest heroine in history, codenamed Shoot Row, not the playboy girlfriend of Tani Stark. Kelly wanted to continue, but she didn't know what to say next. Okay, he's a playboy. Then dump him. Parvati slammed the steering wheel. Every time he changes women, I want to hack his hard drive and play his videos on the computer at Stark Industries. Unfortunately, there's that Jarvis, Parvati. Kelly held her forehead helplessly and then tried to divert her attention. I checked the latest information and found that Tom is related to the Overseas Energy Group. He seems to have been staying in Saudi Arabia. The situation in the Middle East has been turbulent in the past few weeks. NATO has suffered a crushing defeat at the hands of IS, and the Islamic State has occupied Saudi Arabia. It's definitely related to this. Yes, half of the entire royal family was killed. Wellington Group is now the most active energy group in the Middle East. After you destroyed their biological pharmaceutical department, they almost couldn't recover. Old Wellington almost committed suicide because of this. After getting your news, I entered the server of Wellington's headquarters. Tom isn't in Saudi Arabia at all. His IP has always been in Iraq. He's not working with any energy group, but with the Islamic State. Italy welcomes the Pope. The Islamic State unifies the Middle East. Thailand declares war on Indonesia, and Pakistan declares war on India. These days, holy wars are everywhere. The car stopped in front of an inconspicuous building. Parvati had already opened a white glass terminal engraved with the letters Shoot Row and pushed up the holographic projection of the building. I didn't find much information, only some design drawings. Hey, I'm a little regretful. Let your boyfriend come. Isn't that what men do? And it looks like he's enjoying it. Kelly only needed a glance to remember these things. Then, she waved her hand and messed up the projection. This is my business. Connect me to the surveillance of this building. This was the voice control of the terminal. Soon, a serious and handsome young man with mesmerizing eyes appeared on the window. Tom, Kelly, we meet again. Although I don't know where you are, as long as Parvati invades the surveillance here, it will be transferred to me. This is a global live broadcast. At this moment, there are 8 satellite signals that are broadcasting this video. I'm sorry to drag you into this, but without your witness, my victory will be meaningless. Tom stood up from the chair. The camera shifted to his side and followed his gaze across the entire city. Only then did Kelly realize that Tom was standing on the Empire State Building. Behind him was a logo that all New Yorkers were familiar with, Skynet. With all due respect, most of the people in this world are trash. They are mediocre, and living is a waste of resources. As a whole, humanity has lost the motivation to evolve. The stupid live in this world, while geniuses like me have no choice but to mingle among you. These trash are only consuming the future of humanity. The truly creative and outstanding people have no choice but to share resources with these trash. They think that they are irreplaceable and that they provide for us. But is that really the case? Tom sneered as he moved to the side, exposing the thing behind him to the camera. It was an intricate cube, and a palm-sized model of the same shape was held in Tom's hand. The advancement of technology is beyond your imagination. Repetitive, uncreative work has long been replaced. This means that 90% of the population is just a meaningless waste of resources. The cube unfolded at the top of the building. In different parts of the world, there was a cube like this unfolding in a prosperous area. Countless exquisitely structured robots slid down from the cube and assembled into a magnified energy radiation device that was connected to the crystal pillar at the core of the cube. So, the Creator has sent a disaster. This is a test and trial for humanity. If we can't pass it, then we shall perish. The psionic core will spread the radiation of the beacon tower all over the world. Do you know what psionic energy is? Tom asked with a smile. Exclamations of the crowd could be heard from the video. The surrounding high-rise buildings were shattered like building blocks, and hundreds of tons of concrete were thrown into the air. A huge crack appeared on the ground, like a mass of solidified glue being twisted into pieces. The ground was broken into small pieces, and everything on the ground was stirred into a ball. Tom laughed wildly at the top of the building. This is psionic energy. Kelly, this is power. You know nothing about true power, trash. Natural selection, survival of the fittest. In the past, humans conquered nature in this kind of test. Now, the real test has arrived. The Creator has arrived. Either you conquer the Creator like nature, or you die like other animals and adapt to the Creator's choice. Everyone, please remember, this is a gift from the Creator. In 3 hours, the first psionic tide will erupt. According to calculations, more than 5 million people around the world will awaken psionic energy. They're like sharks that have mixed into a school of sardines. They will make the world truly move and screen out the truly suitable humans to survive. Tom smiled coldly at the camera and disappeared into the crystal pillar. Did SHIELD intercept the signal? Kelly frowned. Most of them were stopped. Only a few people have the opportunity to see this video. Parvati raised her head and said, "Something is wrong. What is Tom trying to do? What he's doing is meaningless." To be continued. Chapter 189. The SHIELD headquarters was the government's most important fighting force in New York. It was heavily guarded, and only things related to the most frontline battles were allowed to appear here. This was to prevent Skynet's prying eyes and to concentrate on breaking through Skynet's blockade. The interior of the building was airtight, and even the oxygen was self-produced, but no one dared to say that Skynet could not penetrate SHIELD. In this case, SHIELD maintained a low-intensity conflict with Skynet every day, and no one knew better than them how terrible Skynet was. In a small area, Skynet was indeed omniscient and omnipotent. The Avengers' plan was not going well. Although they had elite agents like Black Widow and Hawkeye, excellent scientists like Pym and Stark, superheroes like Bruce and Peter, and the charismatic Captain America, it was difficult for them to exert their fists and feet. In the face of Skynet's amazing technological weapons, they could only struggle to hold on. The heavy pressure made it difficult for the team to break in, and the internal coordination was out of whack, and there were many contradictions. Tawny was searching for traces of Pepper when JARV jumped out and reminded him, "Tawny's HILD is contacting you. What do they want now?" Tawny skimmed over the empty Empire State Building, and when he did not find any trace of Tom, he replied impatiently, "There was a terrorist attack here, and I'm mobilizing the search and rescue team. There were heavy casualties, and there were ruins everywhere. JARV S-Life search system consumes a lot of power, and I don't have time to argue with you. Pepper is missing, and she may be threatened by a madman. New York has suffered the most terrible attack in history, and now you want me to go to a meeting? I don't care how important your matter is. I only know that many people's lives are in danger here, and only I can help them. Tawny, I know you want to help them, but you have more important things to do. I can send professional search and rescue personnel to help them, but now humans need your wisdom. It's about the survival of the race." Nick Fury took a deep breath and hung up the phone. SHIELD headquarters in New York, now Los Angeles. All the scientists were gathered in the virtual laboratory. The highly informational laboratory could achieve global, synchronized information exchange. Conducting experiments in such a laboratory all over the world was like facing each other face to face. The virtual projection and illusion technology made the space here dozens of times larger. The researchers and agents from other places appeared here in the form of virtual projections. Nick and Fury are at the very center of the laboratory. Looking around, SHIELD experts in biology, information, genetics, energy, and space are all concentrated in such a small laboratory. Some of them came in person, while others were virtual projections from other laboratories. However, the authenticity of the experiment would not be reduced. The records of the Dead Sea ancient scroll and the murals in Atlantis have already been partially proven. Just the portion that has been proven is enough to overturn the history of mankind. Even if this might cause us to fall into hell, we have to admit that mankind was indeed created. Nick's face was ashen, his breathing rapid as he pressed on his chest. "Has the obelisk been deciphered?" he asked, turning to Coulson. "Even with the help of the outsiders, it will take a lot of time. At present, only some scattered information has been deciphered." Coulson's eyes flickered. She didn't dare to look into Nick's eyes. The obelisk has the power to explain death itself, Nick suddenly said to himself. He looked at Coulson. "Don't forget that our enemy, Skynet, told us its name is War Skynet. The ruins and relics of Atlantis and Lemuria also tell us that on the day of the apocalypse, 4 horsemen will descend upon the earth, bringing war and famine to the earth. Plague and death. Skynet is war. Nick's resolute words made Coulson tremble. He looked straight into Coulson's eyes and said word by word, "Now, tell me, what is recorded on the steel?" Coulson's hands trembled and he instinctively refused. The current data does not form a complete logic. Those scattered records can't prove anything. It just repeats some words from the Bible, the apocalypse, the four horsemen, and the ancient civilization's most feared secret. So the four horsemen represent the enemies of the ancient civilization, or more terrible threats, and what we are facing now is one of them. From ancient times until now, they have not disappeared? Tell me, what secret is recorded on the obelisk? Nick paced restlessly in the center with his hands behind his back. Although he knew that such information would be restricted by the World Security Council, Nick still insisted on his right to know. He believed that Coulson would not hide it from him, or would not hide it when he questioned him. The obelisk has the power to explain death itself. Coulson just repeated Nick's words, but it made Nick's eyes light up. The obelisk records information about the Death Horseman. It was recorded by the Inhumans millions of years ago, or even earlier, and kept in the obelisk. I am sure that the four horsemen are not only a threat to humans, but also a terrible disaster for the Inhumans. They are so important that their information needs to be recorded in a foolproof place, their artifact, the obelisk. Nick quickly connected the clues. At this point, Coulson did not need to hide for the Security Council anymore. He said directly to Nick, "Most of the decipher information on the obelisk is fragmented. From the few complete information available, the ancient civilization faced the disaster of the apocalypse. After being destroyed, they came to Earth to rebuild their home. But their enemies, the four terrible disasters known as the four horsemen of the apocalypse, followed them to this new world. In order to protect the peace and freedom of future generations, the ancient civilization, together with other civilizations in this universe, sealed the four horsemen of the apocalypse. Among them, war was thrown into the sun, pestilence slept on the back of the moon, famine left the earth to fight with other civilizations in the universe, and death was sealed in our hearts. Only when love and courage dried up and despair and madness confused our hearts will it reappear." There are still some parts that Coulson did not say, including the history after most of the ancient civilization and the four horsemen perished together. Mankind was just a part of the experiment of the apocalypse. This was recorded in the ruins of the ancient civilization of Atlantis and Lemuria. The ancient civilization was hostile to mankind, almost despising mankind. In their murals and texts, mankind appeared in the form of apes, doing the work of slaves and beasts. The Inhumans also provided us with some information. The shadow of the apocalypse has not disappeared. The decline of the Inhumans, the tragic war in the Nine Realms, the disappearance of other civilizations on Earth in this universe, and the destruction of the Atlantean and Lemurian civilizations are all inextricably linked to the disaster of the apocalypse. In the era of the apes, mankind had technological strength no less than today's. Although they were despised by the ancient civilization, the apes had amazing talent and amazing wisdom at that time. At one time, they created a glorious civilization second only to the ancient civilization. Nick's heart became heavier and heavier. The truth was more difficult to accept than lies, but the archaeological excavation of the ancient civilization, the communication with the Inhumans, and the breakthroughs in genetics all prove this fact. The emergence of Skynet was the most favorable evidence, and even Nick suspected that the current psionic chaos must have a shadow of the four horsemen. Whether the other four horsemen were about to arrive, or what the apocalypse wanted to do with them, could not let it go smoothly. We are not without hope. From ancient times to the present, every civilization that was hurt by the apocalypse left precious gifts so that their successors could use the great crystallization of their civilization to fight against the apocalypse. We need time, Nick suddenly said. Chapter 190. If you can't think of a good reason, then you're screwed, you know? Nick Fury. The capable golden red armor broke the window and descended from the skylight. Tony Stark, wrapped in this armor, told Nick bluntly that the security system here was actually designed by him, and only he could break in with weapons. Nick secretly remembered this in his heart, and made up his mind to find someone to modify it next time before installing the system. Tony glanced around the room, his gaze lingering on the familiar faces for a moment before he moved his eyes away. His helmet popped open, revealing Tony's face full of displeasure. "There's so many people here, why must it be me? I don't think there's anything more important than saving those who were injured in the attack. SHIELD has sent people to rescue the injured, and where are the rescue robots from Skynet? The crisis here is no less than there. We are fighting for the survival of humanity. Time is very important to us now, Tony. We need you." Nick's words were very sincere. Now every minute and every second was urgent. More than half of SHIELD's scientific research power was concentrated, but the progress was still slow. Now, they could only count on Tony's talent. "Of course you need me. When everyone is powerless, who else can you count on but me?" Tony smiled proudly. "Now can you tell me, what made SHIELD so helpless? Let me see, what is this?" Tony pushed away Nick, who was blocking him, and looked in surprise at the simple stone tablet placed in the center of the laboratory. The irregular tablet was inscribed with obscure words and ancient characters, which seemed mysterious and strange to Tony. Lemurian words. This thing actually exists. You should find an archaeologist, not me. If he hadn't seen something similar in Howard Stark's relics, Tony would have had a hard time recognizing this ancient relic from the lost ancient civilization of Lemuria. This sunken continent was once located in the South Pacific Ocean, between North America and Australia. Its history and existence were a mystery. Other than knowing that it was a civilization that existed at the same time as Atlantis, humans knew almost nothing about it. A relic suspected to be in the Lemurian language was found here. This was an important discovery for the civilization of the world. "This is the Monument of Death." Pym stood in front of the stone tablet and explained to Stark, "A divine artifact from the ancient civilization of Lemuria. We believe that the Lemurians were a technologically advanced and powerful civilization that fought many wars with the Atlantean civilization. However, both civilizations have a common enemy, the apocalypse. The apocalypse was very powerful. After putting up a strong resistance, the two hostile civilizations were destroyed together. Most of the traces they left in this world have been erased from the earth by the disaster of the apocalypse. There are only a few things left that cannot be destroyed, and this stone tablet is one of the most important pieces. In the last century, the stone tablet was moved away from the palace of the Emperor of China by the European army. After nearly 30 years of wandering, it finally fell into the hands of SHIELD. It had been stored in the research facility of the prehistoric civilization. From there, researchers discovered a large amount of super technology that current science could not understand, and finally became the evidence that confirmed the existence of the Lemurian civilization. However, because the technology was too advanced, it could not be used, so it had been sealed in the warehouse of the research facility. Until the Inhumans' translation of the obelisk mentioned this mysterious stone tablet and called it the Monument of Death. It is indeed very mysterious. The technology contained in it should not be accessible to humans now. For things that you do not understand, you should be cautious when approaching it, or it will bring disaster. Of course, I'm excluded. Tony focused on studying the stone tablet and nodded. But why is it related to the survival of humanity? Nick looked at Tony with his single eye for a while and said cautiously, "Because the culprit that caused the destruction of the Lemurian civilization. It has reappeared." Tony turned to look at him and said with certainty, "Skynet." In the records of another prehistoric obelisk, Skynet was indeed one of them, but the apocalypse was far more terrifying than we imagined. Lemuria, Atlantis, and even the ancient civilizations that disappeared in the River of Time were all destroyed because of it. Earth is very fragile, and human civilization is in danger. You hope to find the power of the Lemurian civilization to fight against the apocalypse? Tani asked doubtfully. Yes, according to the obelisk. Atlantis and Lemuria joined forces at the final moment of destruction. Together, they searched for the power to fight against the apocalypse and successfully sealed death. They recorded the key information of death on the monument of death. They recorded the power to fight against the apocalypse on the monument of life and time, and then went to meet destruction. Compared to the powerful ancient civilizations, humans had nothing. But now, the prophesied time of the apocalypse is approaching, and Skynet first came to this world and chose doom as the human form. The non-humans warned us that we would be like the countless civilizations destroyed by the apocalypse, ushering in the end. Apart from survival, we have nothing else. That was the belief of the non-humans in despair. They had experienced too many disasters that destroyed civilizations, and at first, they could still persevere and start anew, creating a new civilization. But after time and time of despair, the non-humans chose to go into exile, abandoning civilization, abandoning legacies, and surviving as a race, preserving the spark after the apocalypse. I'll give it a try. Tani was shocked by the news he heard, and he showed a rare hesitation. This obelisk technology is completely different from ours. I'm not completely confident, but I can only try. Nick, help me find Lil Pepper. Nick nodded silently and patted him on the shoulder. Bruce and the rest are deciphering the obelisk. There's a lot of important information there. Tani, let me tell you some of the deciphered information first. Pym brought Tani to the center of the obelisk. The ancient civilization and the apocalypse came from the same universe as us. Tens of billions of years ago, the apocalypse and the first ancient civilization came to this world, and then there was a war that lasted for billions of years. In the end, the first ancient civilization and the indigenous civilizations of the Milky Way perished together, and the apocalypse waited for the second ancient civilization to come. Second, in order to escape the apocalypse, the ancient civilization followed the footsteps of the first ancient civilization and came to this universe. But due to the subtle difference between the two universes, there was a gap of tens of billions of years. When they arrived on Earth 100 million years ago, they only came into contact with the ruins of the first ancient civilization. On top of the ruins, they worked with the remnants of the first ancient civilization to create an even more glorious civilization, and the brilliant light of civilization illuminated the entire Milky Way until the apocalypse came again. The age of destruction came. In the end, our ancestors were separated into the 9 worlds by the apocalypse, and the ancient civilization only left behind Atlantis, Lemuria, Gendia, and the Mu continent. The obelisk is very important to us. The obelisk of death and the obelisk of time and life record the power of Atlantis and Lemuria to fight against the apocalypse, passed down from the first ancient civilization and developed to the extreme. The energy and life from the universe that was born in the apocalypse. Is there any clearer information? Tani spread his hands. This is all vague history. Our deciphering of the obelisk is still in the vague stage, Pym said helplessly. According to some more vague information, the power we are looking for is a combination of energy and life. It has about the positive and negative energy of 1,000,000 stars and the ultimate life form. It comes from a project of the ancient civilization called Sentinel. Looking at the obscure words on the obelisk, Tani said with emotion, "What we're looking for is the Sentinel. The Sentinel is very dangerous now. According to speculation, its complete information is divided into 2 parts. One part records its energy and soul, and the great miracle of sealing death, which is recorded on the obelisk of death. The other part represents the Sentinel's life equation, which is recorded on the obelisk of time and life, and its whereabouts are unknown." Chapter 191. In Skynet's New York laboratory, Chenong maintained his observation ability at the microscopic level through the Skynet robot flowing in Bruce's blood vessels, observing Bruce's cells with a nano-level vision. Before Bruce transformed into the Hulk, his cell structure was similar to that of a normal person, but in the eyes of a scientist like Chenong, it was different. Under the powerful energy radiation, Chun-Ong observed the intense reaction of the genes in the Hulk cells. As if following some fixed program, the double helix gene structure proliferated rapidly, producing a large number of redundant negative energy gene chains and rapidly changing the cell structure. Chun-Ong has found the same pattern similar to the X gene on many gene chains. It can be determined that these genes can play a certain role in the complex energy reactions of a human body and can even interfere at the quantum level. However, unlike ordinary genes, the genes of Bruce's cells are relatively fixed in human form. But in the state of the Hulk's genes, there is no fixed form. This dynamic gene is enough to prove that the genes are not the genetic material of Bruce's race. Chun-Ong suspects that the Hulk's genetic information may not be borne by the material, but the spiritual level, or the meme, is more likely. Anger may not be the key to the Hulk's power, but the Hulk itself. Through simple imitation, Chun-Ong was able to replicate a portion of the cell's form. As a result, the form of the cell was fixed after the replication. Although it still had the characteristics of a high-energy gene, it had essentially lost the genetic characteristics of the Hulk cells. Therefore, although Chun-Ong has recorded the dynamic changes of most of the negative energy gene chains in tens of thousands of experiments, he still hasn't reached the core secret of the Hulk's transformation. He can now replicate many abominations and Hulk clones, and under the modulation of Skynet technology, he can synthesize many imitations of high-energy life forms, even more powerful than the current Bruce. But they will never be the Hulk, unable to bathe in anger. Burning with rage, he became endlessly powerful until he destroyed himself and everything else in existence. It's just that this kind of experiment must be carried out on Bruce. Without Bruce, the cell sample will immediately lose the core characteristics of the Hulk. Chun-Ong is not in a hurry. He had enough time to collect data from wild Bruce, so he didn't need to capture this precious specimen for the time being. The whole experiment wasn't completely fruitless. It could be said that it was an extremely successful experiment. Not only did they collect some key data for follow-up research, but they also discovered some mistakes in the experiment. Under Skynet's research, they also made great progress. Not to mention the abomination, the biochemical weapon, the discovery of spontaneous nuclear cells really gave Chun-Ong a pleasant surprise. The nuclear energy cells did not have any replication barriers. Chun-Ong exposed a bit of cell tissue to a high-radiation environment, simulating the complex cosmic environment. When the cosmic rays hit the cell tissue, it was as if some kind of shackle had been unlocked. The high temperature of the cell dissolved the binding device, and after being exposed to the air, it rapidly replicated and grew stronger. The consciousness of the nuclear cells displayed a strong aggressiveness. The wriggling mass of flesh overflowed with intense energy reactions. Like a gluttonous life form, it quickly plundered the surrounding matter. It wantonly replicated, split, and assimilated. After expanding to a height of tens of meters, the nuclear cell tissue, with a temperature of tens of thousands of degrees and a powerful radiation that was enough to kill all life in a city, pounced towards Chun-Ong. It plundered every remaining piece of information in its genetic instincts and rapidly changed its form, imitating the information in the genes. It pulled out 4 tentacles, and the dense muscle structure released a powerful force of tens of thousands of tons, easily tearing apart the alloy components that were blocking its way. 90% of Chun-Ang's attention was focused on analyzing the data in his hands. He couldn't care less about the mutated experimental specimen. The nuclear cells had not broken through the experimental platform yet. Skynet's alarm mechanism had already been triggered, and the billions of intelligent atoms in the air had already fused on their own. Precise and powerful energy, along with invisible microgravitational waves, bombarded the body of the experimental subject. The ultra-high temperature fusion fireball was restrained on the experimental platform by a magnetic field. The entire Skynet base's intelligent heavy atoms, under nano-level microcontrol, steadily carried out a chain reaction. The powerful energy carried by the thermal neutrons increased the temperature of the fusion fireball, causing parts of it to reach the ultra-high temperature of the core of a star, evaporating the experimental subject at the atomic level in just a short moment. The experimental sample cells already possess the basic instincts of life. Although the level of intelligence is extremely primitive, it already has the characteristics of a collective surface consciousness. Chun-Ong casually analyzed the characteristics of the nuclear cells. As if he had thought of something, he frowned and shook his head. The instincts of life are too strong. As an organ that performs work, the efficiency is extremely low. It is far inferior to magnetic force or gravitational force. The nuclear cells did not choose a more effective method to perform work because of its high-level energy characteristics. Possessing the instincts of low-level carbon-based life, Luo Ji's analysis efficiency is low, and its self-consciousness does not have the potential to develop. Reed looked at the tragic scene on the experimental platform with a complicated expression. The more he knew about Chun-Ong, the more terrified he felt. In the laboratory, he had witnessed at least hundreds of experimental samples that could bear the responsibility of destroying Earth being easily destroyed by Skynet. One of the stronger ones had once destroyed half of the New York base before it was destroyed by an extreme antimatter anomaly that drained half of the base's energy. Due to Chun-Ang's unique hobby, the top floor of the Skynet base could always see the sky. Every full moon, no matter how urgent the experimental task was, Chun-Ong would always come out for a walk. This was one of the few habits he still maintained as a human. Under Reed's gaze, Chun-Ang's body disintegrated into a pile of broken metal gravel and merged into the base. At the top of the sinkhole, under the Statue of Liberty that was preserved as a decoration for the Skynet base, the surrounding metal quickly disintegrated into countless nanomachines and reformed Chun-Ang's body. Chun-Ong leaned against the huge statue and looked at the surface of the sea that was still slightly floating not far away. The calm moonlight and the breathing sea were unusually beautiful, but Chun-Ong saw a completely different world. Algae, bacteria, microorganisms, fish, insects, and small animals formed the human perspective, the microscopic world that exceeded the human observation ability. Atoms, subatoms, and bosons were like planets in the universe, moving in this space. When the dimension rose to a higher level, this space became more complex and mysterious. Dark matter was infinitely deep in the void. The concept of a moving coordinate system composed of time and space, extending infinitely in high latitudes. The past and the future met in Chun-Ang's eyes. On the timeline, from the origin to both ends, countless possibilities, quantum, fate, consciousness, and those uncertain variables formed countless equations and formulae in mathematics, expressing information that was difficult for humans to understand. The gravitational tide from the huge planet beneath his feet, the satellite celestial bodies that reflected the light of the stars above his head, the gravity, radiation, energy, and light from the local and foreign galaxies. These complex information, these huge existences constantly reminded Chun-Ong that everything was different. Thinking Luo Ji, all the information formulae that formed the self, everything that was defined by humans as values, outlook on life, and everything about the world, thinking, personality, existence, self, consciousness, and those concepts of I were all different. Chun-Ong was no longer the mundane creature that could only see the moonlight and the ocean. His vision was infinitely broader than that of humans, his logic transcending all human history and reality. Before the endless Tao, Chun-Ong, who belonged to humanity, ultimately remained in the past, entrusting the oath of never being merciless to the flow of time. Everything in the past was akin to dying yesterday, and everything in the future was akin to living today. He could only find that simple, primitive self at the edge of memory and the corner of time, the existence of Chun-Ong, the tiny mortal self at the forefront of the linear dimension. Chun-Ong never felt lonely. Behind that infinitely broad vision, the fog and darkness would only become deeper. In the dimensions, the world line, the dimensional coordinates, behind the existence of dark energy and dark matter, in his own consciousness, the universe and the tree of scientific knowledge, Chunong would only feel ignorance and shallowness. To him, there was nothing more worth pursuing than uncovering those secrets and achieving self-sublimation. Chunong glanced at the space he was in, the information formed by electromagnetic waves at a glance. It was a life with a simple structure, and to Chunong, it was a simple existence. From the inside to the outside, it traced back to the past and the future, a complete existence that contained countless timelines and parallel worlds. It belonged to an organization called the Hydra, and its purpose was to steal the authority to control Skynet. Professor Arnim Zola, who transferred his own consciousness to the network and carried his life with electromagnetic waves, thought, information, matter, energy, and soul were all grasped in Chunong's hands. An intelligent life is already bold enough to try to control Skynet. Chunong was a little surprised by their arrogance. He casually flipped through Arnim Zola's memories and the conspiracies and plans in his mind, and made an assessment of the possibility of its realization. The probability was not much lower than the possibility of the Earth being destroyed in the next second. The human race can always give me some unexpected surprises. Chunong could not help but be surprised by the cunning and boldness of their conspiracy, the thoroughness and feasibility of the plan. In the future dimension, there was actually the possibility of Skynet being controlled. Red Skull, Baron Citric, Demon Baron, Dr. Zola, Madame Hydra, and Hitler were indeed the most outstanding people with this ability. With Dr. Zola's existence form, if he obtained Skynet, it would really seem like he would soar to the sky. The whole plan was subversive, bold, and meticulous. It was targeted at Skynet and even had a comprehensive intelligence analysis. It made full use of the advantages of the Hydra, and the room for response was not small. It was full of ambition and initiative that Chunong admired.